Premonition's part, as they're already well into the boss, adding tons and tons of extra damage, and they're constantly having these whelplings up. They're really not afraid to be pulling a lot.
Yep, they are whelp into him as well. Premonition, of course, getting blown away by the winds. There are 3 main abilities that we do need to watch out for on Dressron. Not too crazy, but especially on Tyrannical, there is a ton of damage coming out. One of them being a frontal on the highest aggro target within melee range. Important to know that if the tank moves too far, it will target a melee instead. And then the important ebb and flow of the fight is really just making sure that you are inside of the boss's hitbox for the blowback wins, the downdraft that we're seeing right now. And then, of course, spreading out to make sure that you bait the cave-in away from the boss so that there's not too much damage on the melee and you don't have to end up moving the boss.
Yeah, you're seeing Sis did a really excellent job there, running very, very far back, not getting in melee range at all, waiting for the cave-in to happen, then immediately charging back to the boss. It was a very good play there. It's maximizing, their surface area, their space and stuff like that by the gate. They want to be able to chill out by the gate so that the second that this boss goes down, they're able to move on towards Xavius. So right here, you're seeing constantly whelps are out. This is something that only a few groups were really doing, of having them at a constant rate. Usually near the end of the fight, you would see a bunch of whelps being pulled, but E-Man, the second that those whelps go down, so the second that you're seeing Top Cat's giving those whelps a whooping, E-Man's pulling more, getting more damage on, and just adding more and more single target damage for the group.
Yeah, and I like that we've already moved him towards the exits. Once Dressron does fall here, they're already set to go downstairs, although there is a bit of despawn time on that door, but they are thinking ahead, making sure they want to save every possible second as they will start moving on towards the trash leading to Shade of Xavius, of course, down in that log. Meanwhile, MMT moving up onto this final Fury. I guess they're waiting up. They are waiting for him to patrol to the left, as we mentioned earlier, to make sure that they route it properly. They're dealing with this last pack of goos, after which they will engage Dressron. But Premonition's down Dressron already. I mean, they're even further ahead than they were at the differential on Oakheart.
That was one thing, when MMT picked this instance, I really wasn't that confident in their pick, because this is something that every team in America was preparing to run with, right? This was the pick that they had to win. This is the very first map. So, they already right off the bat would be having all kinds of crazy experience here. So to me, and especially when you're having, Teaming Volcanic, Tyrannical isn't too crazy from Sanguine Quaking, right? So right here, it's not too different in the affixes. It's not going to really be changing up how they're pulling here. It really doesn't seem like it was much of the curveball that was really going to be trying to seal the deal.
Yep, so we do see them that they are lucky. There's a patrol here that does patrol up and down the front of the log, and then another pack. Luckily, they did come together when Premonition decided to pull them. E-Man going so low, he already had an LOH used, Jack, while you were talking, because he dipped so low on the pull. This trash can be quite dangerous. There's a lot of casters that could do a ton of spike damage on the tank. In the meantime, distracting the healer with a lot of debuffs that the players need to run out for dropping. So they have to be very careful. They are pulling the next bats as well. After which you'll expect, quite typically, that the group will skip that final trash pack leading up to Shade of Xavius with the Rogue's mass stealth.
Yeah, but you're seeing the last of the mobs going down here for Premonition, and they're getting the last of the mob count that they really need. So again, it's very, very good planning here. And like we were talking about, there's not much of a difference in how they have to be pulling here, so their game plan really hasn't changed from what the standing game plan was last week. And if they keep on practicing it, which they clearly have shown that they are, they have the mob count, they're prepared to be able to invis. They don't even have to wait for Quaking, which has actually led to E-Man's death in the quarterfinals last week. So it's something that, they're in a very, very strong position here, and now it's going to be all about Xavius and how well they're able to stay topped off and make sure that they have that battle res available if need be.
And of course, because of the teaming, it is a bit trickier to get past these mobs right now. The Rogue's going to have to well distract and sap the correct target while they move over on the left. There we see the sap going out, and of course the distract to the right to make sure the mobs back are turned so they have a smaller detection area in front of them, allowing the players to safely sneak by, which also means that, of course, this is a one-shot deal for Shade. If they do wipe here, they will have to deal with that pack on the way back, which is a bigger time dump, and that would give the huge advantage to MMT, which is just now chilling through the rest of Dressron's health at 15%.
Yep, we've seen Shade of Xavius being pulled here. A couple different mechanics to be watching out for, of course, is going to be the Nightmare Bolt that will be going out on players, deals tons and tons of damage, and of course it will leave a little silence field, so another player must be standing in your field to keep you from being silenced / pacified. You have the Feed on the Weak, which will target one player, and you're seeing Zach, who was targeted right there. I believe he had a Deceiver's Grand Design proc to make sure he's staying topped off, so it's a very defensive trinket. So if he drops a little bit too low, he's able to make sure he's staying topped. Then you also have the Growing Paranoia, which is creating an expanding field on one player. If another player steps into your field, you instantly get feared, and is very, very hard to be able to get back into the fight and deal with that really quickly. So
yep. So they do have to be careful here, of course, because they're playing the boss on the side, which is important for the second phase, as we will see a lot of swirlies coming down from the ceiling, and players caught in those swirlies, oof, Well, he does have the shoot that he didn't proc there. Luckily, he came up just after the trash, too, so they could be dangerous later. But once he does hit 50% here in just a moment, we'll see. He will do a mass AoE on the area. There is a fear that goes out on the tank. Luckily, they managed to heal through that. Well communicated that he will need some support during that. Now, this AoE will go out, and we will start seeing these swirlies dropping from the sky. Each swirly that hits a player, of course, does a ton of damage, but every swirly that hits the boss as well will give him a 5% damage increase, stacking up to 10 times, making some of these almost lethal abilities surely lethal.
And it's very scary to see that he was doing a feed on the weak cast right as other swirlies were dropping nearby. So it was very, very lucky that they were not getting anything on him. It was very lucky positioning that it was not happening when he's, hard casting these abilities.
These groups do tend to typically keep him on the side here because it does decrease the chance of some of these swirlies hitting the boss, and he is such a pain in the butt to move properly because he just does cast so much, and he is often immobile for some of these casts. Of course, Zach doing a great job keeping up with all of this heavy damage on the group, and they've also been quite fortunate with a lot of the Nightmare Bolts hitting E-Man because they can hit the tank as well as opposed to one of the squishier DPS or healer.
You're seeing, Malvos, for example, getting growing paranoia here. A lot of the mechanics, for example, are just targeting other players. And you're seeing, again, it's going on top cats, but it's not that big of a deal because it's not proccing its cheat death. So twice now it's gone on top cats. It's gone on E-Man at least twice here. So it's going on all these players that are able to really deal with it very well. And we've seen in the past, especially with Hunters, Hunters being its prime target to getting, almost one-shot, or in fact, getting one-shot by these heavy Nightmare Bolt damage.
Yep, so we are cleaning up the last percent here on Premonition. It looks like they're in a quite solid position, keeping in mind that, of course, they also have 2 deaths less than MMT does. Shade of Xavius does go down here for Premonition, and they're going to take the series with a sweep to nothing.
North America over China in this first quarterfinal, 2-0. Again, lining up with what we expected from Premonition. That game, a lot cleaner. That was kind of the game I wanted to see from Premonition as we looked at them as one of the favorites of this entire Invitational of the remaining field. So well done to Premonition. For MMT, though, that one was, again, it wasn't as sloppy as I think we saw in week 1. They definitely tightened it up, but again, slow and steady does not win you the Mythic Dungeon Invitational.
And you just said it. I mean, we saw it just even from the get-go. 2 packs plus 2 bears from Premonition, just the 2 cat packs, then the 2 bears, etc. And then we have, of course, the invis skip, or the pull to the side skip that Primo did with the 3 keeper pack on teaming. MMT did it in a much sloppier fashion, taking a couple of deaths, needing to have the 10-second res time on top of it as well.
And you saw Premonition taking these very calculated risks with these larger pulls, where we even saw, a bunch of deaths involved the Wardens, but it wasn't really that big of a deal because they were pulling more, they were pulling faster, their positioning was better as they moved more towards the next trash packs there. So, that's something that you kind of keep on seeing is that, Premonition now, it's just kind of both sides, both perfect sides of it. They're pulling faster, they're doing more damage and things like that, but they're also just not dying and they're not having these little stupid mistakes that keep plague them in game 1.
Something I definitely think is worth watching as we move through the duration of this week and ultimately towards the grand finals is the concept of death economy. It's something we've seen with the best teams being willing to sacrifice 3 deaths in 15 seconds for a quick res to get past a lot of other trash and potentially make their run that much speedier. And we were seeing Premonition willing to take a death or 2 here over the course of the series if it meant that they could be pulling more, if they could be going harder on bosses. So definitely something to watch as we continue this weekend. But Premonition now going to be advancing to the semifinals. We will not be seeing them again until tomorrow. But Jack, I'm sure it feels good to see Premonition advance.
Definitely. When you're seeing, your guildies and you're seeing them prepare, they're seeing, them stream their practices and things like that, you want to be able to see your friends succeed and showing the hard work that they're putting in, especially when all this money is on the line. They're moving up thousands of dollars now. They're moving into more and more chances to earn a bigger chunk of that prize pool.
Are you afraid they're going to get too big and no longer raid with you, Jack?
Why even give him the opportunity to discuss this?
I mean, look, at this point, his friends did perform well, so Jack deserves it. Don't worry, we won't give it to him next time. But, Jack, I am now concerned now that I think about it. Are you worried about possibly being replaced? They can afford a better model. They can afford a non-disc priest.
What? I'm hurt. Ouch.
Hopefully they're not watching the broadcast and not getting any ideas.
Oh, really?
All right, well, they're going to be going up against the winner of Honestly versus Team Big Pull. And this, our second quarter of the final of the day before we get to it, gentlemen, this is one I have been really looking forward to. I think of all these quarterfinals, I think this could be the most competitive of the ones we see.
I think so. And there's not much to say. Both very well performed at their regional qualifying. Just strong teams all around. We got the first and the second seed. It should be really good. There was some questions about, some of the competition between China and most of APAC region versus NA and especially EU. But these were 2 teams, one from APAC, one from EU, that just performed so well.
And you're seeing Honestly as a team that really just lit up all of APAC. You're seeing every single match that they were going into, they just demolished these teams. So it's going to be interesting to see, there's all the talk about Europe being this very big powerhouse. How is they going to stack up against, honestly, and how is Team Big Pole going to be getting Big Poles to their advantage?
This guy here.
We will teach you how to punt at some point, but
he's trying. He's coming out of his shell.
Really is. Honestly, certainly one of the bells of the ball of this whole tournament in terms of, I think, teams that we were maybe not expecting to necessarily have as powerful of a performance as they did. So certainly going to be interesting to see how they fare in our quarterfinal number 2 of the day. But that's going to do it for quarterfinal number 1. North America coming out victorious against China, 2 versus 0. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to the Mythic Punjin Invitational. Welcome back to the Mythic Dungeon Invitational. My name is Robert Wing, and joining me for quarterfinal number 2 of the Global Finals here, it's Trekkie and Rich Campbell.
Excited to be back. Really excited to jump on the desk right now, especially with this matchup. Might get to see a Warlock, which is something I'm definitely looking forward to. Already coming in the first series that we did actually see today, we already see teams switching up things different from the week that they qualified in for this global stage of the final. Maybe we'll see that coming out of these teams as well.
Yeah, very excited to see what we have here. Trekkie,
yeah, we saw Honestly do a very a flawless performance in the first series they had. So really excited to see them going up against EU number 2 team, I believe.
Yep. Sure. Yeah, I do want to point out now with the last series we were talked to by production, and there is now a penalty jar. So, please pay in mind that you are actually paying for these puns.
You just made a pun describing the jar. Feed it some money. You're accidentally going to, reveal your credit card on stream.
Just might as well preemptively throw the whole
everything I have. Yeah, but to get back on track with this one, I do really want to talk about this matchup in particular. A lot of people already starting to say that this could be one of the closest ones that we're going to see all day today. And I actually think we may see EU go down. I mean, there's a lot of hype on that EU bandwagon saying it's the strongest region. I don't think that's wrong. I think when you look at the stats, definitely true. But honestly, just being the strongest team out of their region, and Trekkie, you already mentioned, when you actually look at the qualifiers, when you actually look at the proving grounds, they've already had similar results to this EU team.
Honestly, and Team Big Pool had exactly the same amount of points for Blizzard's internal qualification system. So they're matched up. And what we have seen a lot in all the series earlier was that the number 1 and 2 teams are basically always getting to the finals.
Yeah, this is definitely what I think everyone, as we mentioned earlier, is kind of billing as certainly the potential to be the most competitive series. But I believe the map pools are ready to go here, so we can go ahead and take a look at what these teams are going to be going with. As we mentioned, every team, at least for today, is going to be starting off with Vault of the Wardens, actually the compositions in. So taking a look, Rich, you were calling for Warlock and swing for the fences. You got it.
We're going to see it. I like this composition a lot. Going in here on Vault of the Wardens, I think it's really strong. I like seeing the Guardian Druid and the Resto Druid on the side of Honestly. Now looking over at Team Big Pool with the Holy Paladin and the Death Knight for their healer and tank as well. Really do like that.
Double rogue. Yeah, I was about to say double rogue instead of... We've seen a lot of double rogue in the past. We've seen a lot of double arms as well. So the way going for Rogue instead.
All right, we're going to hop into Vault of the Wardens, where some of the world's, World of Azeroth anyway, most vicious criminals, our captain no doubt will end up, unfortunately, if we keep punting. So, gentlemen, take it away.
Do we have a role play jar? Because I think you'd have to throw some money in there now. Excited to see this double rogue. We haven't seen that in quite some time. I think it was actually the first week that we did see it. But Trekkie, this trash pool can be relatively dangerous pulling up to the mini boss.
Yeah, it's a Sanguine and Quaking, however. So we saw in the previous series as well, honestly, doing that pull with the mini boss as well, Team Big Pull. Kind of just, actually didn't see it. They did the same pull, actually, and just a little bit faster. They went right, well, honestly, went for the left route, actually.
Yeah, Team Big Pull, though, melting through, honestly needs to catch up at this point. They're doing a pretty clean job, but falling slightly behind. Team Big Pull already up on the stairs, starting to pull. It gets a little bit more dangerous as you do actually get up the stairs here, because you're going to actually have some of those fell-infused mobs, and we've actually seen teams wipe before on these when they actually do get that metamorphosis going. They have that I-beam. You need to interrupt it. If you don't, it can just spell a full team wipe. The damage that comes out of that, even if it's not tyrannical, is absolutely insane.
Yeah, the Demon Hunter is either going into meta form, either go into Vengeance or Havoc, and those Vengeance Demon Hunters you need to interrupt, and the Havoc ones you can't interrupt with normal interrupt style, so you need a hard CC on that, either be pushback. A grip should work as well. And honestly, right now, actually making up a lot of time here. They were a little bit later on Glaviana, but now they're actually ahead and pulling that last trash pack before the boss.
And Team Big Pull activating that cheat death, though, already on one of their rogues. Now, this is one of those packs that can get a little bit dicey if you don't have the correct interrupts. A nice Gorfiend Scraps, going to get everything grouped up here. That's going to allow the rogues to get some serious damage out. We've actually seen this BM Hunter just doing consistent damage throughout the entirety. Stomp going to be really strong here from that BM, but honestly has caught up at this point, and in a resounding fashion, actually having more percentage up on the board for the trash as they are on the same pack.
Yeah, they're having a little bit of issue with the Sanguine here, healing some of the caster ads aren't interrupted instantly. Team Big Pull having kiting around in that room right before, meanwhile, honestly is kiting towards the boss, which I really like, because that means that they can enable the boss. They're already on the boss. Instead, Team Big Pull is going to have to send someone over and trigger that RP. So now, honestly, pulling Tyrathian and just being a little bit ahead right now. We're having a little bit of the RP already happened for Team Big Pull.
Yeah,
there we go.
Very clearly, though, honestly, starting to take that lead. So maybe we won't see EU finish on top this time around. And we already know that, honestly, with this Warlock can get insane single target damage out. But let's talk about the mechanics that the boss can actually do. Already, we are going to see Tyrathian get that metamorphosis going. This will happen throughout the duration of the fight into both Havoc and Vengeance. And that's going to create a whole bunch of things that everyone needs to deal with. One of the big things is the tank needs to be popping their active mitigation at the right time so the boss does not actually get a bubble, and you can already see the chain moving across the map. If anyone gets hit by that, that is going to spell death.
Yeah, when he goes into Vengeance form, he throws it around his glaives, and they're gonna start going around the room. We had a little bit of a difference in HP as well when he actually entered that form, and Team Big Pull a little bit later that happened, and it's actually very fortunate for them, because when he goes into Vengeance form, he also takes that damage. We're gonna see this phase be a little bit longer than when he goes into Havoc form instead, which will make him do so much more damage and be a lot more lethal.
Yeah, we've already seen too in the last series that we watched, the first series of the day, teams not getting their kicks going the correct way, and that can just be a very easy wipe here, especially on a Tyrannical Keystone.
Right now we see the Vengeance Havoc form actually, and it just does so much pulsing AoE damage here. The healer having a hard time keeping up. There we see Hatred. Needs to make sure that you speed out of that, as the Paladin do end up doing that too. Now he's gonna get up to that. That beam is gonna. They need to move the boss a little bit there as well, and they're just having a little bit of issue. They're actually just staying in their rogues, juicing their Cloak of Shadows, and just going through it.
Yeah, weird positioning though all around. We already saw, honestly, with positioning that looked really good earlier on. You see the Warlock actually using his demonic portal to portal right through it, never having to touch it. But it's going to be Nib right now who's just pulling ahead, and Nib has just been the most insane rogue in this tournament. We saw the last when they actually qualified, and now we're going to see it again today. Nib just doing insane damage no matter what the situation is. These the rogue to beat in this tournament. Honestly, going to be able to take down Tarathian, but Big Pool just slightly behind them, really catching up a lot on the boss, but they have some trash to catch up to as well. As we see, honestly, charge through this impact right now to get to the Imp Mother. Team Big Pool should be able to get Tarathian down.
Yeah, Big Pool had a little bit of issues there as well. They got both of the rogues actually cornered on the wrong side of that chain, and they having Shadow Step, one of them having it on cooldown, had to just run out. Made them lose a couple of very important seconds. And we see the teams are being relatively close. Honestly, a little bit ahead now in Imp Mother, but it's all going to come down to the bosses. As we mentioned before, there's just a ton of bosses doing Tyrannical that is so much health back to back after each other.
And Team Big Pool, I was going to say that they were doing that pull very impressively, but they end up losing 2 of their members when they actually get up to the Imp Mother.
Yeah, that's pretty dangerous for them as well. It's not really very bad trash, but they were so far behind. And now they're being a little bit lucky with honestly having bad luck with this elevator going upwards instead of downwards. So they still haven't killed the Imp Mother though. So the timing of this elevator should be the same. So if they go hurry up and Avalanche Potion, they should be able to get it down there fast enough.
Yeah, elevators being the only RNG that you do have to worry about in Legion. Honestly, with 81% on the board, already pulling Inquisitor, I think that's the big thing to look at. Team Big Pool is lagging in that trash department. Still though, Buffy is going to be down. Honestly, now working on the Inquisitor Trekkie, we see that Sap Soul already going out.
Yeah, Sap Soul as the debuff puts it on everyone in a raid group, and you kind of want to use some ability that isn't very important or doesn't really have a cooldown, or a proccable cooldown rather instead. Team Big Pool now having that Hunter Rest. I'm not sure what caused that delay, but they are all down now, and they should be pulling the boss momentarily.
Yeah, this gets a little bit out of hand here with the Inquisitors. So one thing to notice is on the side of Honestly, they don't have that Blood Death Knight tank. The thing that's really nice about the Blood Death Knight is you can actually run in and he can just grip all of the adds to you, so it's pretty easy to deal with. Sometimes when you see the Guardian Druid, you'll actually see them pull the boss up into the corner and try to line of sight.
Yeah, especially on this pack we're seeing from Honestly too, with those Mogo, just being able to have those grips there, getting all together. We saw instead 2 times Typhoons come out from Honestly, just to get them a little bit more clumped up so that you can have very effective AoE there, especially from that rogue, just being able to cleave them at all times, getting those extra combo points as well. But now, almost dealing with all this trash, they aren't really that, they're a little bit annoying, but they aren't all that dangerous, throwing out those rocks a little bit. As long as you don't get disoriented, this pack isn't all that dangerous, it's just really, really annoying.
And I'm just having a flashback right now. I ran this dungeon with Jack before we actually headed over here. I was playing on my Moonkin and he was playing as a Disc Priest, and he gripped me in and we actually pulled the dogs down, but we're not going to see any simple errors like that coming in from Honestly as they get to this next pack of adds. And having that Moonkin here going to be great. Can do things like Starfall to deal with the adds very quickly. You need to keep an eye on that eye though as well, because if you don't, that will cause that disorient.
Yeah, and those technicians that spawn here, Shadow Moon, they got the Orc doors here, and they just need to make sure that they have these adds interrupted as done so they don't get the cast off, because it's going to be very dangerous. Meanwhile, Team Big Pool having the same one as their second door, but their first door was actually Shaw, which is very easy to deal with because generally there's just a little bit of AoE damage, a little bit of burst damage comes up afterwards. But
I really think probably the Quellens is the most difficult to deal with. If I had to pick one to say, hey, this is definitively the most difficult. But honestly, they already dealt with that. They're dealing with the Sap expertly as well, and the Inquisitor will fall down very shortly here. Team Big Pool lagging by about 20%.
Yeah, relatively close still. Honestly, did pull it a little bit faster, but now also Big Pool having 2 deaths. It's going to be interesting to see if we see something we saw in the last series where they go for, was it Ash Golem instead of...
Yeah, so they basically, but they killed the same trash as if they were going to Glazer, and Premonition then, they kill that trash, and then they actually run over, pull Ash Golem first, most likely to just have better CD management to actually really burst Ash Golem down, then get over to Glazer and just deal with that with no cooldowns, get through that boss, and then when they actually do get to Cortana, waiting for them at the end of the dungeon, all of their cooldowns will be back. We'll have to see if Big Pool or Honestly employ a strategy like that. Honestly, still in the driver's seat here, going to be pulling that Shavarin, and we've seen them do weird stuff in the past. Like, this is the type of team where if they pulled the Meteor boss, I wouldn't be that surprised. Like, if they pulled that Meteor mini boss, like, they do weird things every now and then, but you can tell that they're very well practiced. It comes back to things that we saw in Cathedral of Eternal Night as well, using the Warlock to just kite that ad around, keep getting that haste buff. So this team already has been a team to innovate quite a lot, but they're going to go with that cookie cutter strategy right now and actually pull Glazer first, and that's what we typically do expect.
Yeah, we're going to be interested to see if they manage to do it in 1 or 2 phases, though, because we saw in the previous series that it buys you so much time. Just like in Neltharian's Lair 2, if you can skip one of those phases when the boss goes immune, it buys you an incredible amount of time. And as we can see on the percentage on all the trash, both teams are basically done now. They just have 2 more bosses to go, a little bit of trash, and then the last boss. Now, they're on Glazer, the big eye boss, and we're soon going to go into the statue phase where you're going to beam him with his own laser, basically, and make him start taking extra damage.
Yeah, it's like one of those mornings when you actually do look in the mirror before you head into work and you realize that you picked a jacket that Blizzard wouldn't let you wear on stream. That'll definitely burst your bubble. Now, Glazer in that I-beam phase, they want to be able to get down this mirror in time, and then it looks like everything else is in place, so it should be shooting right back at him. Bam, he's right out of there now. They want to get that damage going yet again. One of the big things, wow, we almost see Mayode go down there. One of the big things we were talking about, though, Trekkie, is these balls that are actually shooting all about the map. And one of the big things with that is it will deal damage to you and actually split if it hits you as a player, but it also will do a small amount of damage to Glazer himself. The real thing, though, is trying to decide if you actually do want to invest that little bit of damage to target Glazer, get that additional damage onto the board. I personally don't think it's the most important thing to do. I think living is way more important, and making sure that you don't get hit by those balls, because the amount of damage it does is never going to compete with the 1.75 million damage that Nib can pump out, for example.
Yeah, and we see Glazer here now just being a little bit... He should be able to kill it. Yeah, they do kill it before that second phase, so Team Big Pull should be able to pull off the same. We've seen them about the same amount of damage on both the bosses before that, but as you said, it's very dangerous living and moving this boss all the time, so just playing it safe here, making sure that they do hit the boss quite a bit, as you can see with those arcane explosion-like effects happen all the time without actually damaging the players.
Yeah, Team Big Pull doing it expertly here too, somewhat closing the gap. They've caught up a little bit on trash, but having that 99%, you've pretty much overpulled in a sense, because that you definitely have to pull at least the mob in front of the door to actually get to Cordana. If they mess up at all, though, when they are in that dark area, the super spooky area inside Vault of the Wardens, and pull any additional trash, that's just going to add so much time to their board. Now jumping on board with Honestly, you can see that they are on Ash Golem. He's inside of an ice cube, if you will. The main thing to that is he is brittle, so he's going to be taking additional damage while he is inside of this effect, and most likely you're going to see some serious cooldowns get invested to just burn him down quickly. Actually, taking a look at them right now, though, it doesn't look like they're using too many DPS cooldowns here, probably because they actually did pull Glazer first.
It's interesting to see all 3 druids at exactly the same amount of DPS, basically. We have representation from both Arrested Druid, Balance, and Guardian Druids doing about the same damage. In Honestly's corner, though, they don't have that many immunities to soak up all these fires. They do have that one rogue, which, as you can see, he actually ended up running over there, but Pump's having to get a few of those stacks. Even the Warlock taking some. We saw the rest of the Druid take some too, just to make sure that you clean up the room, so that when those fire ads spawn, they do not end up getting empowered and explode because of that fire just creeping onto them.
Yeah, this is one of those fights, though, where it's really just going to be a DPS race. I think it's pretty inexcusable to mess up on mechanics on this one in particular. Like, you just need to be going quickly as possible to try to get to Cordana, but all of a sudden, Team Big Pull just going to pull ahead here, honestly slightly lagging behind. I think the big thing is you don't have those cooldowns coming in from your Moonkin, and all of a sudden just spike damage coming out, and the healer going to go down for Honestly. Battle Res instantly going to come out. Mayode still going to be low. They need to get him up quickly. Ash Golem again going to be in brittle for them. This is their opportunity to catch up, but he is already out. They do pull slightly ahead in that brittle phase, but Team Big Pull should be able to get one going here as well and just be able to down the boss. Honestly, now at 12%, Team Big Pull at 15%, just slightly behind them. They only need to pull that last baddie right in in front of Cordana to be able to swing those gates open and try to complete this dungeon. Team Big Pole looking really strong here, closing this one out in Brittle, just absolutely going to melt as Honestly runs down to the spooky room.
Yeah, we see literally just a few seconds difference between these teams. We have Big Pole now having the Brittle phase and finishing the boss off. Now, Big Pole has 2 times Rogue, so they do have 2 Shrouds as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see them skip past, honestly doing the same, but they do have that Warlock who does not have his own immunity or invisibility. So we're having the Shroud go off and just running past there too.
The question is, what are they actually going to use to get past the trash inside of this room? Because they don't really need to be pulling too much here. It's not teaming, so there isn't any crazy math. They just have to get one pull going in front of that door. Team Big Pull, on the other hand, if they mess it, like, this is quaking. This is one of those affixes that can actually make stealthing a little bit trickier. You can actually have mistakes go down here. Honestly, going to jump down and pull this first pack of spiders, this is a really easy one to deal with. Only thing that they really need to worry about is going to be the Sanguine. Team Big Pool's main concern. Oh, did he actually? Okay, gonna actually use a little bit of Cooley there to make sure that he does live. Expect to see Meteor Potion come out at that point. Guess he didn't have it available to him. I was looking over at Team Big Pool there. Honestly, just needs to do this pull right. They want to make sure that they don't pull anything extra here, and Team Big Pull, even with that 99%, they're still going for these spiders. It's very inefficient. If they actually did take advantage of having the 2 rogues, maybe even use an Invispot and only do that 1 pull, it would have been exactly what they needed to catch up with this. Now, honestly, should be able to pull slightly ahead and pull that boss first. There is a slight amount of RP that they want to get started on as well.
Yeah, honestly, you have to pull this little trash mob in order for the door to open up. So Team Big Pull kind of try to skip as much of that as possible. Honestly, having a little bit of issues with the Warlock not being able to actually stealth through there, so he died and ended up just dressing him back up. Team Big Pull, however, having 2 deaths, 1 death and 1 cheat death proccing, however, on their pull. They didn't seem like this pull went their way at all here.
And this is one of the best teams in the EU, and honestly looks like they're going to be able to just pull ahead.
Big Pull still stuck in combat and having to, I'm not quite sure what that happened there, but the mobs are still in combat with them, so they can't just outrun this either. They have to start pulling.
They just didn't even need the percentage. It was so inefficient. They really looked like they were going to be able to pull ahead, especially with the damage that they've been putting out on the bosses. Cordana already going to be pulled for, honestly, this is just their game to throw now. They are so close to actually receiving their loot, going up in the series against one of the best teams in the EU, and Team Big Pool was ahead on trash. They only needed to pull that 1 mob for the percentage that it gives, and it's more than the 1% that they needed, but it was mainly just to open the door, and Team Big Pool here still actually trying to run back to their corpses. Need to figure it out. It looks like we are actually going to see the Paladin get a mass res going here. We'll have to see if they can all get up, but we should just look at honestly, because it looks like they should be able to close this one out, and the Balanced Druid also is going to have major cooldowns. You can see jumping up on the damage meter, doing about 2 million DPS, a strong opener from the Rogue as well. Trekkie, what mechanics do they need to be keeping an eye on?
So honestly, these needs to deal with just DPSing the boss now down to like 40% before, because now they do have the orb, so they can see. They're gonna try to get rid of these purple zones on the ground. But up till this point, up till 40%, not really much is gonna happen. Those purple pools actually wasn't really big on the side there. They're gonna make sure that they take control over it so that it doesn't grow out of control. Meanwhile, the tank just needs to make sure that he doesn't get punted off, but that charge back from the Druid is just not really have any issues dealing with that as long as you don't stand very, very close to the edge, which you don't really want to do. And now we're going to see almost 40% here. A little bit worried with those pools still on the ground there, but you can kind of delay where you're running during that creeping doom, which is going to come spawning right now, and they're just going to have to run around accordingly here.
And they did a great job with the poopy on the floor as well. You're really seeing them not opting into the throw game as much, but just having it onto their tank. Their tank going to be able to clean up the last spot of it right now, and looking really good here. Just need to make sure they don't get hit by the wall.
Yeah, they have a little bit of a tricky situation here. They have to get all the way over to the corner now, and they should be able to do it right there. That was actually getting really... they got really cornered there, up there, while Team Big Pull is just pulling the boss now and coming... just getting that light back out again.
One of my favorite things about the Warlock from Honestly is his use of that Burning Rush. Really is great at using it, not scared to use it as well. A lot of trust in the healer. Like there, you actually see it now too. sometimes I think that Warler actually has higher uptime on his Burning Rush than his dots. Just staying in it for long periods of time. And now they are going to be back onto Cordana Felsong, trying to get that last bit of damage needed. Team Big Pull just getting their pull going. I don't think that they've actually hit the intermission yet. They are melting Cordana currently, getting her around to 50% health, waiting to actually see that phase.
Honestly, only having another 10% now. The last few percent can get kind of sticky because you have a lot of you need to do a lot of damage. And now she starts spawning those walls against. If you're not careful, you don't kill it fast enough. There we go. She does go down, and honestly, it takes the first game.
You just throw up the dots, and you just get hit by the walls. You just let the dots do the work for you. But please, somebody show me the loot. Honestly, well deserved.
Yeah, well played by the Australia-New Zealand team. You know, people are coming in and saying, well, you know, in the finals, we'll see Raider.io versus Premonition, and Australia-New Zealand saying, well, now hold up, because we're going to come in here and do some work, and taking a win off of a European team, which is, as we've discussed all day, that is a big deal. That is something that we didn't think was certainly impossible. We thought they were equal to the task, and they executed on that one. And I got to say, as someone who's watched all this tournament, that was just a joy to actually view. As a viewer just sitting right here, because this was so back and forth. You know, we saw honestly go up ahead, and then we saw big pull, especially on the bosses, just single target DPS, pull right back into it. They overpulled a little bit, but the reasoning was there, you know, okay, if you skip most of that pat and just get to that final NPC outside of Cordana, maybe this works out, but I mean, that one was just neck and neck.
That last room is tricky, though, especially with Quaking. I think if they managed to skip all the way to the door, we could have had a completely different series here. Team Big Pull may have been able to take it. Even with that wipe that did happen at the end, I still think that the way that they executed the dungeon, their strategy to the dungeon was correct. Their execution maybe in that last room was the problem. I think we could see them take the next game, especially with it being their pick. Yeah. This is going to be a close one.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what happened in that last room for Big Pull. It's some part of me felt that maybe they were trying to skip, like have everyone die, run off there and die, and then the Paladin going off, maybe Invisible and getting all the way up there and wrestling them. But didn't really work out in their favor. They must have messed up with something, getting people in combat when they weren't supposed to, and then just having to end up dying there.
Certainly, if that was the strategy, there's a lot of risk associated with it. You know, you see a full wipe if you're going to do that. The time it actually takes to res people, get people food buffs. There's just a lot that you actually take from that death. So certainly would love to know exactly what happened in this room. But gentlemen, this series now enters a point that we haven't necessarily seen a ton of over the course of this event, which is this was an even back and forth game. These teams are on the same level. They absolutely deserve to be facing each other. There's no need to do anything crazy, right? There's no need to make any, you know, huge calls like I have to do this to compensate for the fact that I'm not as good as the other team. These are just two evenly matched teams. So are you expecting any big changes, or do you think it's just going to be the same exact approach, Trekkie?
I think because it is Big Pull's map pick, we might see a pick of a dungeon that they've practiced on, that they feel very comfortable with. So possibly from their side, I think we're not going to see, honestly, do something dramatic just because it might not be their pick of dungeon. So definitely from Big Pull's corner, if anywhere.
All right, well, we do have that map pick ready. Let's go ahead and see where they choose to go. Now, again, they're down 1-0, but this series is more than capable of being taken by them. They're going to head on over to Court of Stars, and this is certainly not a map we've seen a ton of. We've seen it a couple times, but certainly Nelts and Darkheart Thicket have overtaken them in terms of popularity.
Was honestly actually the group that we saw that strategy from the first time. I know it was their region, but I'm trying to remember if it was actually them, and that kind of has been the new meta of going backwards. So it wasn't them, but seeing that from in Court of Stars was really interesting. Another thing that I want to note too is for a lot of these teams, now they actually have history with these other teams. They've been able to watch them throughout the MDI, so they may know which dungeons that team is good on in particular, have seen their times, know if they can beat it or not. So yeah, they might not need to do anything crazy, but they can play to the splits that have already been posted so far in the MDI. I expected to see the Thicket come out. I really did. I expected with those two rogues, we already know how strong rogues can really be in that dungeon in particular. So sticking with that composition may have made a lot of sense, but going into Court of Stars with this affix, definitely a clean idea.
Yeah, curious to see how the compositions are affected. As I said, I think these teams are both in a spot where they can look at that map and say, we don't need to change anything, right? We just need to execute better, and that's really what I want to see. You know, there were some times over the course of this tournament in the regional play where it was like, okay, one team is clearly better than the other. Go to Blackrock Hold, pull out something janky. Where's my Restoration Shaman? Like, I'm going to do something crazy, but I don't want to see that. I just want to see them both play to their strong suits, because I think, again, this was just so close.
Yeah, I mean, you do see that little bit of a kerfumble come out in the end there for Team Big Pool. But if you look at their time, it was still an impressive time. I think they ended with about 7 deaths on the board, and they were just a couple of seconds behind, finishing with, honestly, so both of these teams very strong. And even with that little bit of a hairy situation, they would have beaten most of the teams that we've seen in this tournament on that dungeon.
Yeah,
like,
certainly.
Without a doubt. I mean, we are here today just seeing the best teams in the world. I mean, that's the whole reason that the MDI was set up this way. And the question is it going to be one of those things where it's just the first team in each region just absolutely snuffing out light from the other regions? Are we going to get into a situation tomorrow where it's just one team from each region? That's honestly what I'm somewhat pulling for. I think it would be exciting to see everyone represented tomorrow, but honestly, definitely being the real deal already. And Team Big Pool now, with their map pick, needs to show if they can do it.
Well, we're going to have to see the compositions first, and they are ready, so curious to see, as I said, if they'll just stick to their guns on this one. And yeah, nothing really too crazy from either team.
I really like what Honestly is doing, because we've seen a lot of double rogue and double warrior from several teams, and honestly just going with a very weird comp. Nobody has done this comp so far. So
this comp, it's so good on even higher level keys. Like if they were doing a plus 20, like if they were going like that high, you know, maybe even a plus 19, that's where you really do see the balance druids start to shine because of their consistent AoE that takes a little bit of time to ramp up. The other thing that's really fun is checking out the Warlock and seeing how they spec. I think on Court of Stars in particular, probably not going to go for Reap, or like Sow the Seeds, sorry, which will put out 3 of those Seeds of Corruption. I think maybe we'll see the Warlock go for Phantom Singularity.
yeah, it is teaming, so bosses, there's more trash, but...
All right, well, we're going to hop on over to Court of Stars. So I believe you two are due for a romantic boat ride, so enjoy.
Trekkie and I actually took a romantic boat ride over here. That's how we got to the MDI, so we are well practiced and ready to commentate this delightful trip down the river.
Yeah, they gotta take the scenic route just to see the place, as we haven't quested here enough so far at all.
Oh man, questing here without flying. Oh my goodness, I wish I had a boat myself to actually get through Surmar, but we are going to see Honestly excelling in RP, and they are zooming on down the Mississippi.
Oh, well, you don't need a boat, you just have the water strider.
Actually,
it works as a boat.
I don't have a water strider. Don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. Everyone's just hating me right now. Oh man. All right, we're getting back into this. Team Big Pool now. One of the big things that we do actually see coming out from this initial poll, we actually get to look. Trekkie, this is all your forte. We're actually going to jump on with the tank first. We're seeing Sefu's going to be the legendary coming out here, and then also the Skull Flyer.
Yeah.
Soul Flyer, sorry.
Yeah, we can see the legendaries a little bit here. We see them skip the first drive. Nothing uncharacteristic at all. Both teams are actually honestly seem to be pulling it. They were having some volcanic there, but I'm not quite sure what happened there. We were looking at Big Pool, and especially the new talents. But right now we're seeing Big Pool just gonna go up here. I really like them going to the left here, getting some extra percentage and going for that route instead. They just going for the sentry right now though, honestly doing just dealing with 2 cats however instead, and those can be very dangerous.
Yeah, those caddies can be very risky. We've seen that plenty of times before. They are not kidding with the damage that they do actually put out. Team Big Pool going for a Big Pool though, with those Mana Worms bringing them all down. They still have a Guard, a Construct, and a Sentry to go through with this pack. There's just a massive pull coming out from them, and you can actually see their Druid deactivating that tower right now.
Yeah, I think this is why we're seeing Team Big Pool shows this map. They knew exactly what they wanted to go for. Honestly, had a little bit slower there. They did pull an double or triple cat pull at the start, because remember, it is teaming, so it has more packs of those, and then just knowing exactly what route to go, everything just dialed down. And Big Pool now being quite a little bit ahead now, pulling this next pack with another extra sentry too, and a sentry on the side too, and then just having to deal with that. I'm going to be interested to see the next pack after that. It's a little bit more dangerous with an extra Arcane Elemental there, but honestly, not dealing with that pack yet, just dealing with that second sentry.
Yeah, I know we don't have any mages here, but I do want to time travel for just a second and actually go back to that first pull. We didn't get quite the chance to talk about it that we normally do. One of the main reasons that we actually do see groups skip it is because one mob by itself itself, it's easy to get past with an in-cap, and it's just not an efficient pull. Only having that one mob, it's not worth an overwhelming, resounding amount of percentage towards the dungeon. Buffy having to deal with all these volcanics here as they do get this pull going, but it's just not usually worth pulling it.
Yeah, I love all the volcanics on the Hunter too. Here we see 3 again. They just spawn, depending on how many mobs are up there, they spawn them at range from them. So Team Big Pull having to deal with that construct and making sure that they have that one interrupted and CC'd properly. And honestly, now coming to that pull, so they're a full pull ahead now. So we're gonna be interested to see here when they do end up pulling the boss. Remember, it is tyrannical again, so this bosses will be very dangerous and will take quite a bit of time. And we're gonna see both teams having a rogue so they can just poison the vial there so they don't have to deal with the last 25%.
Yeah, and to go back to what you were saying with the volcanic as well, I think the main thing is, especially with teaming, we are going to see a lot of those volcanics coming out, and it's going to be the Warlock. He actually did go for, I was saying I might see a Phantom Singularity here. He did actually go for Sow the Seed, so he's pumping out 3.
This is super interesting here. Team Big Pull choosing to pull the boss and a bunch of trash too. This is a little bit of dangerous trash as they have one of those constructs that still have it alive at 5%. Just need to make sure that they interrupt that one, have everyone focus that one down, cleaving down the boss. It didn't really benefit them that much, 5% on the boss, but they are basically done with the trash too. So honestly, also on the boss, a little bit ahead now, but they are 1% behind on trash, although Big Pull has a few mobs that they need to kill there. Cheat Death going off on the rogue there.
Big spike there, and he's going to take it again. Gonna go down, Trekkie.
He took the big spike, and then he got the debuff that makes you have to jump as well. Otherwise, it will be a magic dot on you, and he wasn't able to cloak it, I guess. Or he was just late with it, and that proccing Cheat Death and then instantly dying after that. Need to use a combat rush.
Sometimes you have to take a deep breath after that Cheat Death goes off, and that might have cost him those seconds there. Another thing that we do want to note, all of the items, for the most part, have been taken out of the dungeon that you can use, except for the vial. So we expect to see the vial going off for both of these teams here. That will actually, you'll see the patrol captain run on over near that fountain area, and he'll go take a sip and just die at 25%. We're expecting to see that out both of these teams. I want to jump back on board talking about that volcanic, though. It's going to be going on ranged members of the group. And if you actually do see the Warlock being the one who has to take care of that the most, being a very mobile class, can deal with it very well, but BM Hunter is just top-notch at dealing with those volcanics. So that is going to be really strong for Team Big Pull here. Another thing that will aid them on this map pick is their actual team composition.
Yeah, Big Pull being a little bit behind now too, or like a lot behind actually. Choosing to pull the boss and trash. Honestly, now going the conventional route. They're going deeper and deeper into Court of Stars now. The boss, as we said earlier, 25%, it triggers that effect, and he's gonna start eating that vial or drinking that vial and just get poisoned and end up dying. So honestly, now doing the trash book that Team Big Pull used with the boss, and it's gonna be interesting to see because Team Big Pull effectively now just killed the boss, and they are done with the boss and all that trash. So honestly, dealing with that trash now, definitely ended up working in Big Pull's favor, even if it really wasn't that effective in terms of damaging the boss, but having everything up at the same time just bought them a bit of time.
Yeah, now we're actually not even going to see, honestly, use that strategy that was employed by their region, though, of going backwards and actually going closer to the start of the dungeon and moving through to enter this next phase of the dungeon. And Team Big Pull also going to do the more standard strategy that we were more familiar with. But if you are not familiar with Court of Stars, definitely want to point out how this next area of trash actually does work. It's a little bit tricky. You're basically going to be pulling a specific mob to try to get more or less a mini boss out, and then once you take down all the mini bosses, you're actually able to pull the boss, Trekkie.
I like what Big Pull is doing there. Is skipping the first trash with an Inquisitor and a bunch of imps, and just going for, I'm guessing they're going for the Enforcer right away if they are lucky to have it on the left. Meanwhile, honestly doing that general pull, it isn't fortified, so I'm not sure if they can't, I doubt they're really scared of that pull, but they deemed it not worth their time.
Well, we've talked about it before, Trekkie. On teaming, sometimes if you have like those double Inquisitor pulls and things like that, you try to just skip Inquisitors. And that might be the reason that they went for it. That may have been their strategy going in here, and then they actually get there and they just screech on past it. Now we are going to see that Enforcer with the Inquisitor pull.
Yeah, Big Pull just dealing with that first Inquisitor, gonna spawn that first mini-boss lieutenant, so to say. They're at the exact same percent on trash percentage too, so Big Pull now choosing to get a little bit of trash for that mini-boss too, because that mini-boss just really doesn't do anything. She does a very, very small AoE whirlwind kind of effect. They just have to move out a little bit. Tank going a little bit low here looks a little bit dicey, but they should be able to keep themselves up pretty well. Meanwhile, honestly, just dealing with that Enforcer on the edge of that, trying to line of sight the big AoE fell explosion she does.
This is the part of the dungeon that always tends to go south, right? If you're on Fortified here, this ends up being a mess. Honestly, being a little bit sloppy here with their pulls, we're actually going to see them lose it 2 DPS. They're going to full wipe.
This is going to be full wipe. They weren't able to... They looked like they mispulled those imps that are kiting around there. I'm not quite sure with what, or if they just ran into them, but they had a little bit of issue because they weren't tanking that. They were starting with the Enforcer at the corner and then line of sighting it, but then got one explosion. Everyone got that debuff. It still, even if it's not fortified, it still does a ton of damage, gives that debuff to everyone, and then getting the second explosion too. That is probably the messiest pull we've seen so far from Honesty, and well, it's gonna happen sometime.
I would definitely agree. I think this is probably the messiest pull that we've seen out of them in the entire Mythic Dungeon Invitational, and this will give Big Pull an opportunity here to pull ahead. I think the big thing is they entered this one behind a dungeon. This is their map pick, and they're looking flawless with all of their trash pulls. They only have 1 death so far on the board, and already they're getting very close to being able to pull this first boss. And what we were saying before, honestly, actually did go down. Now, this is going to be a big pull from Team Big Pull. Gorfiend's going to pull everything in here. Tree of Life coming out from the healer, trying to keep everybody healthy here. And that Tree of Life is going to be important when they get to the boss as well. And some major damage coming out from the rogues. They both have cheat death, so they should be safe here. And alongside a Tree of Life, they are hanging out in the shade of creation. They should be absolutely fine as they do finally bring down this Enforcer. Now they're going to move on to the Lieutenant. But that is a cooldown on Tyrannical that you really want to use when you get in onto that second boss. Talk about this being scary on Fortified when you're actually dealing with those Enforcers and you have to be breaking line of sight and doing things like that on your way to the Lieutenant, on your path to the boss. But on Tyrannical, this dungeon can be terrifying.
Yeah, Big Pull really living up to the name there. Had a little bit of a shot in, and we saw the healing cooldowns because they weren't able to actually line of sight the big explosion because they just need that extra DPS instead. So really, really interesting to see from Team Big Pull here, and we can see the legendaries now for the rest of the Druid as well as their talents, but right now they're just dealing with this next Lieutenant, just dealing a little bit of damage. It focuses a player and gives him a damage dealing debuff. It's interesting that you can actually line of sight as well doing the first cast, but it's not really that big of a deal. He goes on the rogue now as well, and it's just a little bit of damage, but honestly now dealing with a bit of trash back here. They're quite a bit behind now with both percentage, and I think they're a full Lieutenant behind too.
I like the fact we are seeing Prydaz come out from the healer here for safety, and you could also see in the talents definitely running that Tree of Life ability. That's going to be important for those big pulls, and also when you do get to the Tyrannical bosses, definitely when we do get to that final boss as well, honestly trying to catch back up here. We'll have to see if more players start to wear Prydaz when they actually do get to this second boss, because that Flame Wreath is terrifying. Like, it's a terrifying boss on Tyrannical, and then it gets even scarier when you actually get to Moandra.
Yeah, that boss is going to do a lot of damage, and if you're going to stack up as well, it's very constant damage though, so generally more throughput is a little bit better. Prydaz really excels in those encounters where you have a little bit of spike damage now and then instead of like constant damage.
Like then Thicket, for example, it's really strong because you actually do see it on those bolts coming out time and time again. And I really like what we're seeing here coming out. Own Its Intuition and Impeccable Fell Essence just going to be hands down the strongest legendaries that you can really use. Every now and then maybe you'll see the head get used as well, but every now and then actually switching to the other ring, the Archdruid ring, to get Soul of the Forest as well, but specking into Incarnation here, not having too much trash to pull. We're actually going to see Mayode just sticking to those legendaries, those really strong single target damage legendaries, and just keeping that Incarnation. That is one of the really nice things about the Druid legendaries, is being able to swap your ring and then having those big pulls, having Soul of the Forest based off of the ring, and still having that Incarnation when you get to the boss.
Yeah, it's important to know while we are seeing the legendaries, they are free to swap them however they want between they're in combat with different mobs. So we definitely will see them swap up depending on the bosses, especially like some of the very dangerous ones. Honestly, it's actually two full lieutenants behind now, and Big Pull is just going to get ready to pull the boss. Meanwhile, honestly, chipping away that second enforcer, going to get that second lieutenant, and Big Pull here now pulling Frame Breath.
Yeah, the whole thing with this boss, as well as you're going to see these ads come out, need to make sure that they are dealt with quick damage, but also controlled. Otherwise, they will put out a huge amount of damage to the entire group.
Yeah, those teams are probably going to get Arcane Tornado right away so that they get silenced. Actually, they just get stunned and just get destroyed right away. Don't even have time to move. And now the boss also cast a Withering Soul ability. It just kind of needs to be interrupted. You do need to have 2 interrupters on it, though, to be able to get everyone. Otherwise, it gives you debuff on the whole group, and you just have to try to dispel it. And you really don't want to spend any time not healing on this fight, as the boss has a stacking damage aura that goes up and up. Right now we're seeing Team Big Pull take a lot of damage from this effect here, and it's just going to be up to the healer. If it's going to be able to keep up. He has those cooldowns. He did use on that really, really big pull. Should be coming up ready if they aren't already for the healer.
That's the big thing. A late Tree of Life in any of these fights can be a lifesaver for sure. You're seeing just how low that the group is actually falling here. Flame Wreath at about 33%. Honestly, still trying to catch back up in this one. They're just going for a long stroll at this given moment. Finally getting a pull going here, and Team Big Pull should be able to get this one down. And one of the scary things about this dungeon on Tyrannical, I've already alluded to the fact that Flame Wreath and Melandris are both going to be scary bosses, but as you mentioned, Trekkie, it's stacking damage buffs. And it's the main thing that goes on with all these fights, is just the further and further you get into the fight, you're going to see more and more damage, and actually seeing Tree of Life coming out a little bit later there in these late phases of the fight. And you could see during that last 15-20% of health, the entire team, even though the damage is going to be higher throughout the entire last portion of that fight, just being able to keep the team healthy is going to be the Resto Druid inside of that very powerful cooldown. But we got a mystery to solve, my friend.
Yeah, we gotta try to find whichever one is the spy actually here. So right now they are looking for all the remongers and trying to find whatever clues they have. They are 5 in total, and we'll see how good they are at actually like looking at boss models.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have any shortcuts here as well. Looking at the Rogue, one of the things that I really do think makes Rogues so particularly strong when they get in these Mythic dungeons is just their spec works perfectly for it. They don't need to sacrifice for any portions of their damage, going into any weird things for survivability as well. It is all inherently there in their kit. And you can also notice that Horn of Valor is going to be there. That is because you can actually use some of the older trinkets, and they are boosted up to that 935 item level. You can see that right there in the gear set. It says gear set 935, artifact set to 965. It's just Rogues excel, especially when you give them trinkets like that. And it looks like they finally have found, and this is one of the longest mystery phases I think we've seen. A lot of the times we actually do see the Demon Hunters, and we see the Paladins, different things like that, that are able to more quickly identify who the culprit is.
Yeah, luckily for Team Big Pull, they are a little bit ahead, so they could spend a little bit extra time making sure they get the right one. If you do get the wrong one, you actually get teleported out, booted out, and can't ask around for another 30 seconds. So honestly, now pulling the second boss, Frame Breath. Meanwhile, Team Big Pull dealing with this little disguised Dreadlord before they get to actually pull Melandris and enjoy that RP there too. But honestly, 60% less more in the boss. Team Big Pull has to wipe for them to be able to make up for this really now.
I mean, even Team Big Pull, if they decide to have a long sleuth phase, if you will, there's no way that their sleuth phase is going to be as long as it takes to get down Flame Wreath on Tyrannical. And looking at, honestly, they also do have some of these options as well to maybe use something like a Tree of Life in these later portions to make sure that everyone stays healthy throughout the duration of the fight. But Team Big Pull going to be able to get down that big old Dreadlord and move on over to Melandris. What are the actual things mechanically that everyone should be taking a look at during this fight track?
The main ability, when you think Melandris, you always think about his slight Maelstrom that does damage, and then he spawns copies of himself. Those also do all the abilities he does. So the longer you get into the fight, the more of those copies you have doing those two. They do spawn after like about a minute and a half or something, so they do end up having a kind of a soft cap, so to say. But There's a bunch of other stuff, and we see here one of the tornadoes is gonna spawn, or it teleports over there, and then a tornado spawns right next to the boss there, and it's just gonna take up a lot of real estate on this small room which you have allocated for you to take him down. He also does like frontal appears that you just need to move out of. Just don't stand in bad is a generally pretty good idea. And there we see the Slicing Maelstrom does a little bit of damage. That's the first one. And then we're going to see them ramp up more and more, and we're going to see more and more cooldowns to be able to survive those come out later on.
Oh, Zoinks honestly going to be able to solve this one very quick, and suddenly they should be able to get back into this slightly. By no means will they be able to do this without a wipe coming in from Team Big Pool, but they have closed the gap just a little bit here. So they will be able to get themselves started on Melandris a lot quicker than we necessarily thought that they would, but Team Big Pool, it's definitely going to be their game. The ball is in their court. You can see the real estate gets a little bit sketchy as this fight does ramp up. The Maelstrom Slice is obviously going to increase in damage as well. I think with a Tyrannical Key, we'll actually probably see it hit its peak damage and stay plateaued for quite some time. But we already do know that there is a Resto Druid who has Tree of Life at their disposal. And with how long it took them to actually figure out who the culprit was, who was the Dreadlord hiding out, they may have that cooldown back for maybe the last 30 seconds, 20 seconds of this boss fight. It'd be absolutely incredible. And we are seeing as well some damage coming out from the Resto Druid. So looking really comfortable here. About like 125k coming out. I saw a few rats come out. By no means switching into kitty form to get damage done here, but Big Pool looks very comfortable on Melandris.
Yeah, Big Pool still had a little bit of sketches. They have all the copies up. I believe it's 5 copies at the same time that does those Slice Storm as well. They have another 20% to go. I haven't seen all cooldowns come out. The Hunter used the turn, so there we go, another Slicing Maelstrom. We're probably going to see Tranquility or something big healing cooldown come out there. They might have another one at a very low percentage, but right now it's looking really, really good for Team Big Pool.
Yeah, I don't even think they really need to invest a huge cooldown, but just like that, we are going to see the Hunter go down, and instant BR going to come out as well, and he is just right back into getting those aimed shots out. I think maybe just a Gahanir was actually invested there, but nothing too big. Wild Growth's getting spammed out, Volcanic being dealt with masterfully, but big spike damage going to come out here to the whole raid. I would love to see a cooldown invested, even if it's just for the 3% to make sure that they got it, but please, somebody show me Big Pool's loot, because they are going to look so impressive and tie up this series.
Yeah, well played by Big Pool there, and once again, the story of this series so far, one wipe decides it all. That was another situation where, on that map, it was neck and neck. They looked very convincing. They were both at the same trash clear percentage, both sitting at 69%, and then, you know, unfortunately, honestly, hits that big wipe. And that pretty much decided it right then and there.
Yeah, they had it during an Enforcer too, which means that they did a bunch of damage, invested a lot of damage into the Enforcer, and it looked like an Impact just ran around and just pulled them, and they just couldn't recover from that with the Enforcer being out, couldn't line of sight it, was too much damage, and it ended up costing them a lot, like basically the game. I mean, they might have still had issues, but that was a big deciding factor.
I'm just double checking loot really quick to see if anyone actually got an upgrade from this run, and it looks like nobody got loot. They may have just gotten artifact power, but this is actually really cool. We got to give it up to Blizzard and to production right now, actually finally getting a little bit of insight into how everyone is going to be speccing, into what legendaries they're going to be using. And even though you can be switching gear around throughout the entirety of the dungeon, if you are playing these classes and you take a look, you can kind of get a pretty solid idea of what they're going for, what concessions they're actually taking to single target damage for their AoE damage, where maybe they are switching up those trinkets. So it's been a lot of fun for me today to actually peer into the souls of our players and see what they are thinking.
We saw the Hunter swapping to Prydas on the last boss too, and we saw that Shield actually doing quite a bit of work. However, the Rogue opted to like, nah, I got enough survivable to have that cheat death, I have that feign, and I believe you can even dodge the Slicing Maelstrom as it is physical damage, so it just don't needing that extra damage reduction from, or like survivability from
cheat death is great, especially when you do compare it to Aspect of the Turtle. I think having cheat death just a lot of times is superior, because it's like having auto bubble, for example. It's like if I don't need to use it, it doesn't get used up.
Yeah, hard-hitting analysis here as we've come to a conclusion. That's that cheat death is good.
It's good. Not dying when you're supposed to die.
It's a good skill.
It's nice.
Yeah, we see there the times, and again, the story of this particular map was that wipe from Honestly, and we are going to head into a game 3. I gotta be honest, I am actually just completely biased towards, honestly. I just want to see a little bit of the thunder from down under close out this series from
You just
honestly.
wanted to say that. You don't even like honestly. You just wanted to break out that.
I am a big Australia fan in most things. You know, I tend to very passively root for them, but I'm just excited we get to go to a Game 3. This is by far, I think, the closest series we've seen thus far. Of course, barring the actual administrative ruling game of yore.
Oh, yeah, that one was a little bit closer, but otherwise the matchup here is incredibly tight. We're seeing both these teams doing very well, and basically, like, one of the deciding factors is one of the messed up pools, Vault of Wardens for Big Pool, and then honestly having something similar in Quarter Stars. If we see a perfect game from both these teams, it might be incredibly close.
Yeah, and I think the whole thing is, though, is having those perfect games is definitely difficult on these plus 17s. And when you see the map pick coming in from the loser, it does have a big effect. I think that second game, there was a little bit more of a gap, for sure. Even though it was still revolving around maybe one mistake, the gap did seem to be just a little bit bigger. And now when we move into this third game, it is going to be Honestly's pick because they won the first game of the series. Maybe getting that first game advantage will be enough for them to close this one out.
Yeah, when we have seen series go to 3, it has kind of felt like that is ultimately the deciding factor, but no more time to waste. Dungeon pool ready, and we're going to Upper Karazhan, so gentlemen.
Wait.
Nelt Slayer did not get picked. Is this a bug?
Is this tyrannical?
No. I was about to say I would have loved to see this being the pick before because it would have been tyrannical.
I almost punched the screen. I actually almost punched the screen, but we were talking in the back. I want blood. I want to see Upper Karazhan on a tyrannical key. I just want to see flames. I want to watch the world burn. Please, if you are a player and you are watching this and you have the opportunity to go to Upper Karazhan on tyrannical, it is what the people want. You will live out a life of fame, and we will thank you. We don't care if you die 160 times. Please do it for us, the people. We're counting on you. We're counting on you.
In case you were curious, this is what happens when you don't let Rich wear the jacket he wants to wear.
It's true.
You put that away. That's contraband. Yeah, I'm sure at home we all want to see some action, but...
we got the retweets. Tweet at Warcraft right now. Hopefully in the next series I'll actually be able to do it. It's beautiful. This is made of my grandma's wallpaper.
Anyway, back to the Mythic Dungeon Invitational and not Rich's personal vendetta against fashion. Again.
Not against fashion. I stand on the side of fashion, but Upper Karazhan.
Upper Karazhan. Yeah, this is going to be Honestly's pick, and as we've seen the trend tend to be over the course of this tournament, namaste. The team that generally picks the map tends to come in with a strategy specifically pertaining to the affixes, and honestly has been fairly consistent with their composition not only this weekend, but also in weekends prior in terms of what they want to do, in terms of leaning on that Warlock. So I'm excited to see them pick Upper Karazhan here.
Here's the thing. This one should go fast, too.
Yeah.
There isn't too much trash to deal with, and having that fortified affix on the key, the one aspect of the dungeon that is going to be really strong, being the trash, is not going to be too much of a factor. So we should see the teams go fast, but even not on Tyrannical, obviously joking about that a little bit earlier, wanting to see this on Tyrannical, the bosses, even without that buff, are going to be tough, and we've seen deaths come in countless times on this exact affix, like on this key. So I'm still excited to see it, and I think that these teams are some of the most apt to actually deal with it. Maybe, though, this time around, we actually do see some comp changes. I think that this could be a map in particular where you maybe want to switch off of some of the classes, maybe even switching off of the Moonkin. Moonkin is really strong. Balanced Druid having that utility, does have the ability to res, but we have seen it historically with, honestly, them not switching from this comp very much.
Yeah, they've picked the one comp that they're comfortable with and has a lot of utility. They have 4 of the 5 people that can use invisibility, just get through a bunch of trash, and not to mention they do have that rogue, so they can give that 5th person invisibility if that's needed too. But going up to Upper Karazhan with bolstering, fortified, and explosive, it's gonna be basically a speed run for both of these teams. The trash, as you mentioned, there's not much of it, and the bosses, there's a few of them, and they're a little bit dangerous. But otherwise, I think we're just gonna see both these teams just trying to go as fast as possible, trying to do kill these bosses as fast as possible, basically.
Yeah, gonna turn into awesome dungeons done quickly. Very excited to see the speed run. Let's go ahead and take a look though at the compositions. Trekkie, anything jumping out at you here?
Ooh, I'm liking the Protection Warrior pick from Pumps.
Yeah, we've talked about Protection Warrior quite a bit. We should dive into that one. The only other change, we're actually going to see Big Pool go back to that Holy Paladin. Makes a lot of sense.
All right, well, our game is ready. We're going to hop on into Upper Karazhan again. This decides the series. The winner advances to the semifinals. The loser stays home, and they've made a small amount of money, but will no doubt be disappointed. Still, for us as fans, great series. Two very evenly matched teams, and they're going to throw it all on the line here in the House of Medivh. Gentlemen, take it away.
Yeah, a lot of money on the line and also a lot of pride, honestly, trying to represent their region, definitely being the best hope, being the #1 seed from their region. Let's see if they can do it against a powerhouse European squad. Trekkie, let's actually dive in, though, to the actual reasons that you would want to bring the Warrior here, because there are a lot.
Well, I want to go into first what we saw from Team Big Pull. They used a speed potion and just skipped that pack with the Shroud too. Meanwhile, honestly needs to deal with these very effective trash pulls, as they only give 2% each. So Big Pull being a lot ahead here. However, as you mentioned, the Prot Warrior, I believe it's mainly for Medivh because they are super useful there. They have that spell reflect against the piercing the missiles, and they can also have that intervene damage reduction on all those people all the time. They're honestly choosing to use this Shroud at this point instead, getting through the big adds too on the sides here, just getting up to the nullifier as Big Pull is killing right now.
Other thing to note, though, is Team Big Pull will actually be able to use an additional stealth as well, having another Shroud of Concealment, but we're actually going to take a peer into this protection tank, because this is one of the most interesting decisions that they have made. We've seen the protection warriors come out before on this particular dungeon, and I think the biggest reason is, of course, going to be, as Trekkie, you alluded to, that spell reflect on Medivh, a lot of utility, and the other spells can be negated with the intervene.
Yeah, the intervene, actually, we're seeing him use the Inspiring Presence instead, which is something that's really useful for the raid, as it gives you a bunch of the leech for the whole group here. However, Team Big Pull is already on the boss, actually, and just like went through it. We're probably going to see them pull it as they just did that one trash pack, pulling the boss. This boss is not tyrannical. It's going to die really fast, probably during the first evocation phase. So they don't need to worry where they are right now. They will need a very small amount of room to deal with this. And we're going to be able to see if, honestly, it's going to go for the trash, or they're just pulling the boss here, or they're resetting right now. So they're going to go for the slower approach here, killing the other trash, then pulling the boss, killing it where he spawns instead. So they're going to be close to that portal. However, Team Big Pull now, 75%. Should be getting the evocation phase in just about 5 to 10 seconds, and then just going to destroy it in using all cooldowns, and this fight is going to be very short.
Yeah, like you mentioned, the Curator will go into an evocation phase. Once in that evocation phase, going to take an absurd amount of damage. Going to be very similar to what you saw from that Brittle phase that comes out in Ash Golem a little bit earlier in the series. But look, just absolutely going to get chunked on down. No way that he's making it out of this evocation. Not even 50% through the cast, and already deleting about 75% of his health. Now, honestly, getting their pull on, and I think that they may actually be ahead here by just a little bit. If they can, when they actually do hit that evocate phase, they may be able to jump ahead. Honestly, should be kiting towards that door as well. They've already dealt with this trash, so we'll have to see how quickly Team Big Pull can actually get the trash down, because we've already seen once it hits evocate, like that bar is a little bit misleading. The second it hits the evocate, it basically represents 0 health.
Yeah, it's gonna be dead by the end of evocation phase. So right now it's hard to really say, but Team Big Pull dealing with this trash a little bit slowly. We're gonna see Curator go into evocation phase in just a few seconds here. Meanwhile, Team Big Pull has another pack. This is going to be really close. This is going to be basically equal when they actually end up going through that portal, but it looks like it's going to be in favor of Team Big Pull, as Curator just now going to do his evocation phase, and they're going to do another 50%, so it's still definitely in favor of the Team Big Pull quite a bit.
I mean, it's just much closer than you would initially think that it was on that pull. Team Big Pull, though, like you said, is going to be ahead. Not much trash going to be standing in their way here, as they do try to get on over to Medivh, and this is one of the scariest bosses in here for sure. We've already talked about how unforgiving it can be, and that's actually going to be the reason why, honestly, most likely did decide to bring this protection warrior. Curator finally going down for them, as Team Big Pull makes it straight up to the guy who made all of this possible, Medivh.
Yeah, they're gonna make sure that they have all those interrupts on point, and also you can deal with these fire bolts too a little bit effectively by moving if you're at max range, because if you move during that travel time, you will not take the damage, you will not take the debuff. which can otherwise be very dangerous. Seeing honestly doing a little bit of trash here, that's very uncommon. I'm not sure if they mispulled it, but otherwise you usually see just laughing at that Moonkin just flapping about, disengaging and then flapping about. But otherwise that trash is generally skipped. There's a few bats later on as well that you see some teams dealing with. Team Big Pull, another 40% here. It's going to be interesting to see which intermission phase they do end up getting. They get Flame Breath first. Here it's just all about keeping those 2 people with Flame Breath alive. Make sure that those do not move out of their Flame Breath and nobody runs into them either.
It's honestly way better for them than if they did get the birds, because with the birds, with the actual composition that they do have, going to be a little bit trickier to deal with. So this is going to be fine. I don't think that they will have a problem here. And already, without that Tyrannical Affix, going to be able to absolutely melt the Shade of Medivh, making it look like an absolute joke. We talk about the boss being very hard, but Team Big Pull looking so prepared for this dungeon in particular. Honestly, right on their back right now, finally getting the pull on Shade of Medivh, but the Guardian's images are going to come out. Now they need to be dealt with by Team Big Pull. Honestly, getting to that 50% area.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how much damage honestly have. If they're able to skip that second one, we see Flame Breath go out on honestly's corner as well. Gonna have to deal with those. Team Big Bull having another 8% if I remember right before he went to the Guardian image, wasting a lot of, losing a lot of time. It's obviously not their fault, but they're losing a lot of time here, having to deal with his Guardian images. Medivh is going to spawn soon. Meanwhile, honestly, having another 5%, are they going to be able to kill it before they get it? If they actually do end up doing that, that means that is a huge favor in terms of a team, honestly.
Yeah, and already head on trash as well. We already see some cheeky stuff coming out with the Warlock. We've seen this in the past with banishes and stuff like that coming out onto demons and enslavements as well. And now they are going to fall down to that Mana Devourer room. Honestly, catching up. They just need to try to fall through the hole a little bit faster here. But honestly, with that extra trash percentage, that could mean a lot. We were critiquing a little bit because they did some inefficient pulls, right? But it does not seem to be a problem here at the place that they are at.
No, they do have a little bit. They can kill a few of those bats later on as well. I wouldn't be surprised to see both of these teams skipping the big kind of Draenei-looking mobs right before chess event, as they are relatively inefficient depending on if their percentage would allow them.
The flaps!
Yeah, the
flaps just feel, oh man, it's just so great. It's so great. It's the best glyph in the game.
We saw something very interesting last time we saw Upper Karazhan though in the previous weekends, and it's basically if they end up choosing to pull this spider, honestly do end up pulling that spider instead of pulling the boss used all the way into the corner. I believe it. I feel like it's probably an easier strat depending on what immunities you have.
I think they'll probably still go for the corner strat. I think they just wanted to take out. We saw them take out the spider last time too, if I do remember correctly. Last time that they were here, we've seen a lot of the groups actually taking out the spider. Team Big Pull, on the other hand, actually going to be pulling Book.
Yeah, we saw this in our early series too. They pull a Book and as a rat, and they just give a lot of trash percentage here. We're gonna see them die and give about 5 to 6%. There we go, 5% exactly actually. That is a lot of
neck and neck now.
Lot they don't need to deal with later on.
Yeah. I mean, look at it. Now we have Team Big Pull, and honestly, with the exact same trash percentage, and they're both pulling the boss. Honestly, with just that nose ahead, they're getting that first 10% off the Mana Devourer. Now, the thing to look out for with the Mana Devourer is going to be these spheres that you actually do see get shot off. Not quite as many immunities coming in from this side of honestly to deal with that.
Yeah, honestly, gonna have a little bit of issue with that. I believe that's why they're not putting it all the way up to that corner, because that requires you to use have those immunities. With him being out in the open, you can kind of move about, take a stack or two, just prevent the boss from reabsorbing these mana balls, basically, because if he does get too high up, he will wipe the raid straight up. And you see the Warlock getting a few there. I believe the Warrior took some with Spell Reflect up, just to not get those stacks, as he does not have that immunity.
Yeah, just to reiterate exactly how it does work, when those balls do come out, they are going to give you a stack basically that will allow you to do slightly more damage, but also you will be a little bit more vulnerable, but they need to be dealt with somehow, even if it is with using mitigation to not take a stack, but to get rid of the actual sphere itself, because of the Mana Devourer, like you said, Trekkie, does consume all of them. It will be a team wipe, but honestly going to be able to get it down just a little bit before Team Big Pull. Team Big Pull probably using slightly more immunities there to deal with it instead of going for extra damage, and you can see a huge spike coming out on the rogue, then another one onto the second rogue. His cheat death going to get procced here, and finally they are going to catch up at the same time, pretty much the same time. Honestly, now just needs to finish their supper, needs to get all of this trash out of the way, and they get on over to Vizdoom. Whoever wins this is going to go on to the semifinals, and it is as close as it can get.
This is actually really funny. This is basically my first experience with explosive ever. Just pulling this whole pack and then just instantly realizing, oh shit, it's explosive. And that does not translate very well to you. They have both explosive and bolstering, so you're not gonna see those super big pulls here. But because those ads will get bolstered, and they're gonna kind of inefficient to kill these as well. You do have the bats, you do have chess event as well, that do end up giving you that, a bit of percentage too. So right now, Big Pull basically at the same point here, a little bit extra trash that they need to deal with, but as long as they get those explosives down, I don't think we've seen a single explosive go off, luckily, in this series.
Yeah, they're not terribly hard to deal with, especially with the compositions that we are seeing coming out of these groups. It's pretty clean. One of the things is having that Moonkin, you know, that's just going to be 2 globals to be able to take them down nice and easily. You see the healers helping out quite a bit. Actually, in this particular scenario on this trash, we are seeing the Resto Druid just pump damage out throughout that entire pull. Now we are going to move on over to that chess event.
Important note as well, honestly, picking that warrior, partially because Medivh, but is you can actually do that on the very last boss as well, and get that debuff of Fairbrand, or what it's called, on the boss too. And here we see them just skipping trash actually all the way up. Gonna be interested to see if they, I don't remember if they reset or they're gonna try to take them with the chess event. They're having the warlock actually just straight up go and die. This is what we've seen from them before. Everyone else just invis, the warlock just running as far as he can, eventually dying, and they just ending up resting him. That's a way of skipping it.
Yeah, they completely use their warlock. He's a complete Wilfred Fizzlebang for them. They just sacrifice him time and time again. They are actually going to lose their Boomkin as well. I do not think that that was part of their strategy. Usually we do see them sacrificing the warlock to get by trash, because he's the only one in the group 90% of the time who doesn't have a stealth. A lot of the time they do have that guardian druid instead of actually having the protection warrior, and then they just, you know, go about resurrecting the warlock, and there you go, they've managed to skip by all the trash. I think that's going to be an additional 5 seconds on the board that they didn't intend on having, though, with the Moonkin going down. That Moonkin now, as soon as it does get resurrected, going to pop its incarnation and do some big damage here. Starfall going to cleave onto a lot of the chess pieces. The king going to have a protective shield. Once you bring down an ad, it will make the king vulnerable. The shield will come back, though, again after some time, so you'll need to bring down another ad until it gets to 30% health. Then it will be vulnerable for the duration of the fight. We see Team Big Pull, on the other hand, though, they actually are going to lose their rogue when they open up onto that chess event.
Yeah, he's going to have to stealth back or invis back, and that should be relatively fine. Something else that we're also seeing is kind of interesting, honestly, playing Alliance. Meanwhile, Big Pull is playing Horde, so we are actually seeing the Horde chess event right here on Honest's corner. Of course, they do exactly the same things, but they have a mean, angry warlock, orc as their queen, apparently. But they're dealing with the king now. As you said, once you get down to 30%, the boss just doesn't go immune anymore, so he starts hitting a little bit, so you want to have the tank there. But otherwise, it's just about killing the boss before you end up now having to deal with trash, go back, backtrack a little bit, killing those Feldbats. Not sure if they were a little bit unsure with the percentage, or it might as well been planned too. Meanwhile, they're sending the Resto Druid away, starting the RP, because you're gonna have to wait for that anyway. So I believe from Honest's side, it was very clever actual way to end up using those, taking those percentage down while you would just AFK anyway.
And that could be a big mistake for them, though. I mean, like you said, like they do get some of that RP out of the way, but having to backtrack there, it is a little bit sketchy, especially it's like so close. It looks like both of them are going to be pulling the boss at the same exact time. And just like that, we have a real close one on our hand as a decider, Trek.
Well, this is looking really close, but remember, as I said, honestly sent their Druid over, starting the RP. They're on the boss right now. Meanwhile, Team Big Pull has to endure another 20-30 seconds of this RP before they can pull the boss. Honestly, definitely a big lead right now, and it's not a tyrannical boss. This boss should go relatively swiftly here, and they are, as I said, they are using that Prot Warrior as well. They can spell reflect that debuff that the Warrior actually got on him right now, instead of having to interrupt it.
Maybe saving it for a little bit later. We are going to see Angry taking a huge amount of damage from that ability, even on this fortified dungeon, but the damage is pouring on in. We are going to see these portals coming out very soon and see everyone hop on over to that first ship.
Yeah, they're ahead of Team Big Pull right now. Walking into that portal, getting sent to the first ship. It's not really too much to deal with right now. It's a little bit of a step up from what happens on the in the first phase. But right now they want to make sure that they avoid this disintegration beam, and then you should be able to get to the boss. And just make sure that they don't get that disintegration beam right now, because right now they are at the mercy of falling off if they get hit by that one. However, some classes have the Shadow Step. The Moonkin obviously has that disengage too, so if they do end up getting sent off, they can get back up there. They have the debuff as well. They need to dispel. Eventually, we're gonna see here. Actually, they just pushed the boss there. That I don't think they actually had that debuff even once here. So now they're gonna get the boss phase.
Yeah, so there's gonna be a debuff that does go out, and it's actually going to make you somewhat explode and shoot out some purple balls of death. And they just absolutely avoid that mechanic here. Now, this is going to be really easy for them to deal with. This third phase ends up most of the time being a lot easier than that second phase. Just going to have these adds, they'll passively cleave them down. They have a Boomkin, they have a Warlock. That's not going to be a problem at all. The main thing that they want to be focusing on is this boss. They should be able to melt it quickly. Some serious spike damage coming out to the whole raid, but they are just seconds away from qualifying, and Team Big Pull into the wings, going to have 2 deaths here coming in. This is all Honestly's, 4% remaining. Vizdoom will fall down, and they will be progressing. Who even cares about the loot? They have just gotten themselves a huge amount of prize money.
Australia New Zealand says, not today, Europe. Go ahead and take it to the semifinals where they will meet Premonition. What a series. You know, we talked about how close that had the potential to be, and it really went the distance. That last game, no wipes, cleanly played. Those deaths at the end from Big Pull, who cares? That was a great series.
And they would have definitely won the game, even if Big Pull did a perfect lost boss fight. So I think from Honestly's side, they had a little bit of a slip up there with, I think the Warlock was supposed to sacrifice himself, but the Druid also ending up dying. Whatever, it cost
That's
them
just
5
figure
seconds,
eights, man. That's style points right there. That's a little bit of that BM.
Hey, yeah, just let the chicken die. Why not? But I mean, the big thing is just actually looking at it, and you know, coming into today, I mean, throughout the entire tournament, everyone obviously gassing up EU. It's probably with Sloot's fault, but now we actually have an EU team getting eliminated. No, I don't think Trekkie's as bad at gassing up the region as Sloot is, and Sloot's actually does not even live in Europe anymore. So I don't know where that comes from. But no, Europe deserves a lot of the praise. They do have probably the most, I would say, if you look at their teams, they have the most depth in their teams. Like, they have a lot of teams that are definitely qualifying at that upper echelon of play, but all of a sudden, their second best team gets taken down by a different region.
Just incredibly well played, and this was a team that I really think capitalized on having the time to study up in between their first weekend and then this weekend. Honestly, looked good in the first weekend. They look incredible this time around.
Yeah, honestly, doing really good job. They had, as I mentioned before, they had a little bit of a slip up on the second dungeon in Court of Stars. But otherwise, this has been a very, very close series. Both teams being equally matched, taking one game each until the last one, and I'm just super hyped for seeing Honestly versus Premonition in the semifinals tomorrow.
Honestly, probably has some tricks up their sleeves as well. I mean, this was one of the groups that had interesting strategies going into absolutely everything. We didn't see quite as much tomfoolery going on in these particular dungeons. I mean, Cathedral was one of the ones that we looked at in particular, but Cathedral most likely will be a dungeon that they go into again. So that is something that bodes very well in their favor. The other teams will have some time to study that up because they already did play. Like, that's the nice thing for Premonition right now, and this goes both ways. It's like, okay, I know exactly who I am going to be playing tomorrow to get into the grand finals. Watch the VOD just over and over again, see what the team was doing.
Yeah, certainly a great victory for Asia Pacific in general. And now that I think about it, the Boomkin death actually makes sense. How are you going to get that chicken dinner if the chicken doesn't die?
Gotta cook the chicken, eat the dinner.
Taking a look at that bracket, though, Premonition versus Honestly tomorrow. That's going to be semifinal number 1, and I'm extremely excited about that one. I don't think there's any limit to how far Honestly can go if they execute as they did today. But up next, we will be seeing Team MPE versus Free Marcy. Free Marcy, the other representative from Asia Pacific. Team MPE representing China. So another exciting one on the horizon. But whew, that series, man, that was just chills the whole time watching it.
That was good games.
We're just guaranteed that in the grand final, it's not just going to be Europe. Like, there is going to be another region. I'm particularly very excited for it. I don't think that there's any... I think probably everyone knows I'm definitely cheering for NA, just cheering for my own region to actually see represented in that grand final, but would not be upset if Honestly was there either.
Yeah, certainly a lot to watch out for tomorrow. A lot of representation of the various regions. Again, that's what it's all about, this global stage, bringing the regions together to do battle for the title of who's the very best. But for now, that's going to do it for us. We will have another quarterfinal coming up next. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Mythic Dungeon Invitational. My name is Robert Wing, and joining me once again on the desk, my bald brother Sloot and my unfortunate haired brother Jack.
The outcast.
I'm just saying that because you're more handsome than both of us, and it makes us depressed. How you doing, Jack?
Amazing, amazing. I see the pun jar is filling up rapidly.
Yeah, we figured it was just go ahead, bring it back for this desk. Sloot, if you just want to start making advanced deposits.
At this point, unfortunately, I don't have my wallet. I was mugged outside by an angry baldest mod, but I will just put my phone in there right now.
Okay.
And that's that.
Jack, I'm not going to let you put anything in this.
I don't think I'm allowed to.
I was going to say, you're still not there. We'll teach you. But in all seriousness, we are now on quarterfinal number 3. So we've now witnessed 2 great series. I think that last one, again, I don't want to necessarily overstate it, but that was a great series to watch. How'd you guys enjoy it back there?
It was fantastic. I mean, we saw, honestly, a little bit lagging behind here and there, but when they actually engaged with Medivh, they just ran him over. We saw how Big Pull, for example, we were talking about this backstage, having them go into the Guardian phase, having to get to the birds down and things like that, and we were kind of talking about, like, oh, I wonder what, honestly, he's going to be getting, and they didn't even get it. They didn't even get a second phase. So they just burned right through it, gained a huge advantage, huge time advantage. They just snowballed over it.
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely a lot of fun to watch, and it's nice to finally see everything we've been talking about in the past weekends of this is going to matter, that one death's going to matter, moving the ball to the door. And so we're finally seeing those series where all the little things are really starting to add up.
Very exciting, and definitely setting the stage for a very eventful semifinal tomorrow. But taking a look at the series we have now, let's go ahead and take a look at the compositions. Again, this is going to be Team MPE from China versus Free Marcy from Asia Pacific, again, representing Australia, New Zealand. Great showing, by the way, from Australia, New Zealand. Gentlemen, what do you see from the comps?
I see double blood.
Standard is as standard does.
Well, what I don't see is a rogue on Team MPE, and I don't think they played one in their qualifiers either, if I remember right, Jack.
I don't believe so, no. I think they still stuck with that Windwalker Monk.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Windwalker represents. So we're going to see. So we're having the number 1 seed from China facing off with the number 2 from the APAC region. Yeah, I mean, definitely pretty standard over on the Free Marcy side. Sometimes you see a Holy Paladin instead of the Lesser Druid, sometimes a Guardian Druid instead of the Blood. But Team MP coming with that Windwalker Monk and no rogue.
It's going to be very scary to see, especially when we're talking about how many things you can skip, because there's so many different mobs, there's so many different paths you can be taking, and really, rogues were just brought to every single series that we were casting there. So interesting to see how it's going to start.
Well, as we did in the prior 2 series, we will be starting off in Vault of the Wardens. We're both the jar. The jar is actually.
I'm just eyeing the pun jar right now.
The jar hungers.
The jar hungers. Sloot, will you feed it?
Make sure you keep it ajar for the rest of the match.
Do you have anything else in your pockets? Anyway, hopping into Vault of the Wardens, gentlemen, take it away.
All right, Team MPE starting off on the larger screen in the blue border. Again, going for these very aggressive pulls that we've seen pretty much standard throughout. Free Marcy is in the lower screen with the red border. Again, identical pulls here. Actually, MPE is not pulling Glaviana yet, but Free Marcy is.
Yeah, we've seen teams get, kind of penalized by that earlier with, just moving too slow. You got to have big risk, big reward here. Of course, we are back to the Sanguine Quaking Tyrannical Affix set here at the moment. They're just finishing on Glaviana, notoriously known to be one of the most dangerous mini-boss mobs across all dungeons. She just does such a substantial amount of damage once she transforms. Similar to the rest of Trash, leading up to the first boss, of course, there are a lot of them that metamorphosize into, we have a huge hit there, taking, having a death. They just used the battle res on that. I don't really think.
Really?
Yeah, I don't really think that was the best call. It is a short run back, and they do have battle reses to spare, but certainly probably not worth it in the end. We'll see as they move up to the staircase, of course, with the multiple mob pull here along with the Belchers.
Yeah, and you're saying, like you're talking about, they do have a BM Hunter, whereas Marcy has a Marks Hunter, so they do have an extra battle res to spare. So I guess they're feeling that confident that they really just they just can't waste any time. They just want to be able to jump on top of it. You're seeing huge damage coming out of the Windwalker Monk, and we saw their talents and their current gear and things like that.
It's really interesting to see as well, Jack, from Free Marcy just kind of walking up the side there, and it's going to be one of those packs. While Team MP, of course, still chewing through their pack at the bottom. So much Sanguine on the floor here. Team Marcy pulling the last set of large pulls prior to engaging Terrathon as well.
Exceptional damage coming out of the Monk here. I was going to say, having that Horn of Valor, that was something that we've seen, I believe it was out of the Rogues in the past, where, having that huge burst of, primary stats of the agility there, just being able to absolutely annihilate these mob packs. And again, Team MPE doing another very large pull just before the first boss here.
So they will be engaging the first boss here. Free Marcy looks like we'll get to it first, meanwhile Team MPE working on that last pack. And I believe they're just finishing up the last Myrmidon, of course. You want to make sure that is not pointing at the group, as it does cast an AoE cone silence. Tirathon, of course, now jumps down. Notice how they move the packs into the room to make sure they start that RP with Tirathon, saves them a bit of time. Free Marcy, of course, getting ready to pull here. They do actually have 52%, so I was mistaken. They did kill that pack that they jumped up the side. They had just pulled it to the side earlier, and that's why we didn't see it. But they did indeed kill all of the trash prior to the first boss, as is typically seen from groups.
Right here, you're seeing Team MPE posturing, getting ready for all the RP to finish. They're also engaging in Tirathon here. So, about 25% health differential at the start here as Tirathon is about to enter his first Metamorphosis phase.
Yep, so we do have that first Metamorphosis phase, of course, going into the Vengeance version of the boss here, after which he will transform into the Havoc version around 40%. We do know that once the first transformation happens, we do see those glaives come down with that clothesline fell chain, wanting to make sure we dodge that out of the way. And of course, needing to deal with these Fell Fury adds that if they're allowed to cast too many times, they will explode for large damage, 10 stacks, making sure we interrupt and cleave those on top of the boss effectively. And Jack, as we do know, these Dark Strikes coming up, the tank does need to have active mitigation up at all times, otherwise the boss will gain a heavy absorb shield. And we're seeing the final transformation coming from Free Marcy momentarily here, where Jack, you're no stranger, there's a ton of damage coming out in a moment.
Yeah, tons and tons of AoE damage is going to be going out on the entire group. And right here, you're seeing Xerace is doing an exceptional job, almost 700k DPS, doing lots and lots of damage to be pushing the boss out of, the tanking phase there into the final phase. So this is where you kind of have to be judging how much you're able to be healing, how much you're able to do damage. And right here, you just need to be putting in tons and tons of healing, get people topped off, get to that comfortable position. Very good job by Xerace avoiding the Hatred eye beams right there. So a very, very good position that you're seeing out of here. Very clean in how they're getting everybody together. And of course, I believe you're seeing the Shock Baton out of Xerace's gear. You're seeing that little bit of extra damage that they're having by mixing in trinkets that can be flexible, that can deal a lot of damage too.
Right, you are, Jack. I am not shocked to see that Shock Baton at all. They'll be DPSing Tirathon down for the remaining percent. Meanwhile, Team MP just getting their final transformation there, and of course, twirling around that well in the bottom. Free Marcy should be finishing Tirathon off soon. Of course, a lot of damage pulsing onto the group. The last eye beam goes out. They make sure to spread out well for that quaking, which in combination can do quite a bit of damage. Team MP having a death on their warrior there, immediate battle res. That's 2 down for them now. That is 2 down for them now. And of course, Free Marcy moving over to the Imp area with the Imp Mother. Those Imps and Imp Mother wanting to kill any of the imposters coming into the area.
Ooh, well played. And of course, you're seeing, like you're saying, the second battle res went out, so they only have one banked up, ready for them as they're going to be going towards Inquisitor as they have to deal with all the imps. So overall, Free Marcy's doing a very, very clean pulls. They're doing a very, very good job of making sure that they're having control over what they're pulling. And we even saw with the Sanguine, we really didn't see a lot of Sanguine healing out of the first half of the trash here.
No, it's definitely quite clean. And this is one nice advantage for Blood DK, well, DKs in general, but especially Blood with their AoE grip, is that they have such great control over a lot of these trash monsters, being able to grip them out of Sanguine pools when you get a big kill, making sure that there's not too much damage going out.
Yep, and you're seeing Free Marcy downing the Imp Mother here and seeing their timing. So it looks like they do have very good favorable timing. They're getting those volcanic potions down, hitting the ground, not taking any kind of extra fall damage, and they're making very, very good time here. It's very clean. That was one thing with Premonition that we were talking about, how they missed the elevator just by a couple seconds here. Having that extra damage there, even though it's not, the Imp Mother's not particularly challenging or anything like that, when you have that little bit extra speed, it gives you, a huge advantage.
And we do see that Free Marcy has indeed pulled Inquisitor, the second boss, along with a couple of the dogs on the side. They have to be careful with those, make sure they interrupt them, and of course move the boss out of that Sanguine pool. The boss healing for even one tick of that Sanguine is a substantial amount of health they have to re-DPS through, especially in this tyrannical setting. Team MP will be heading down the elevator. A bit favorable for them too. It's already at the top, but they won't be able to get down as quickly as they would with Avalanche Potions. Of course, Jack, we do know on a Tormentum with some of the mechanics at 70 and 40%, he will summon mobs from 2 of the 4 jail cells that these players will need to DPS down. An advantage, of course, DKs here.
Yep, and you're seeing, of course, so you're saying the advantage there. It's very scary how low they're able to drop with all the quaking and how tightly packed in everybody is. They also did a very similar strat that we'd seen earlier, pulling those dogs, right at the start of the boss, getting them cleaved down early, so you're getting, some mob count, and you're also moving to a position that the boss is not going to be going back to here.
So particularly at this one, we do have that Felguard that is quite irritating to deal with. He will drop aggro on the tank, charge around, and start stunning people. The tank will need to frequently regrip or retaunt him back to make sure they sustain aggro. Meanwhile, the Warlock has to be interrupted because of their seed cast, and in the meantime, the boss is doing continuously his very irritating, as we can see here, Sap Soul cast that will place a debuff on all players, which causes their next ability used to have an increased cooldown.
And that's one thing annoying as a healer is you have to make these decisions of what ability are you casting next, preparing for the Sap Souls, getting as many healing casts or even damage casts off before that Sap Soul goes off, and then you have to find whatever is filler for you. So if you're playing like For me, Priest, I'm able to use just a purge, instant purge on the boss, get some useless ability that I'm never really using anyway, get a cooldown on that rather than something, very, very vital.
So Free Marcy moving over to their second jail. We will have the Mogu side, I believe, with the Quillen there. Meanwhile, Team MP just working on their first jail at the moment as well. They're also in that Quillen area too. Once again, advantage here because of the grip. It's quite nicely, they can quite nicely pack all the mobs together while maintaining the proper directioning on those tormenting orbs to make sure that they don't get disoriented.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing, the debuffs that they're putting onto you as a flashback from like Mogushan Vaults, where you had to deal with those increasing slows. You ever remember pulling all the trash mobs right as you're going into the instance there and having to AoE them all down as fast as possible?
I try to suppress those members, but thank you for reminding me.
I'm glad I didn't have to tank that, the dogfight.
Those were doggone days.
Oh.
Free Marcy finishing up the last of the Mogu there. They will just have to chew through the rest of the boss itself, after which they will likely pull that Shivara with the 4 dogs and move over to what, of course, usually is Glazer, but we did see in the last series, 2 series ago rather, that we did have Ash Golem be killed first prior, probably because of some cooldown planning on the team side.
Yeah, when we were seeing, for example, Premonition's warrior who had died, about half, or not even halfway through the Inquisitor boss, so they, probably had a lot of cooldowns to be able to stocked up. So it'd be very interesting to see if Free Marcy does go immediately to Glazer here, just to be able to make the most out of what the cooldowns they've already taken advantage of.
Now, Team MP is just taking a fair bit of time chewing through Inquisitor here. I mean, they're only now opening their second jail, so their DPS is just kind of not adding up to the effectiveness that Free Marcy had. Free Marcy, as we said, it does move up to that Shivara with the 4 dogs. They do need to be interrupted a lot of damage going out with that Quake Pulse on the team, having to constantly kite her up and down this little path here to make sure that she does not sit in Sanguine for too long.
Yeah, she was really skirting past the edges of that Sanguine there as you're trying to run her down that little ramp there, get all those little mobs down, and then run her closely back to where you want to be going to. So it's definitely a challenge of positioning because the whole mobs are sitting right at the door there, and you want to make sure that you're able to pull them back, so that way you can move continuously towards the door and back to where you need to be going.
And of course, Free Marcy, we do see here, we just commented on this, they actually are going to Ash Golem first, so we will see them pull our resident Molten Giant prior, who is of course encased in that ice and will be re-encased later for the brittle phase. It is always very ice to see this guy.
Well played there. Free Marcy, of course, like you're saying, is about to engage Ash Golem here. Team MPE, of course, is still chewing through Inquisitor, trying to get it down, and they have just a couple % left over. And you're going to see in the freeze go up, activating the statues. Brittle phase is going to be activated here, and then huge cooldowns are going to be coming up. And you're already seeing really big damage coming out from the healer. Boom is probably going to be spiking up super hard in terms of damage. Retro Fresh, of course, doing tons, just spiking up so rapidly.
Right, sure. So the boss is, of course, taking 25% increased damage here for this 20-second brittle phase, after which he will re-shatter, heat up the platform, and there will be some fire trash that comes down as well. And of course, if any of that connects with some of the fire pools that go down, they will cast a huge AoE damage on the group. So you want to make sure that you're either eating those pools that will go down, such as the DK pre-AMSing and running through them, we might see it here, or killing the mobs. But of course, the more effective measure is to usually absorb these pools and just keep DPSing the boss.
Look, just like you were calling out, Brath is soaking up all of those fire pools right there really quick with the AMS, and you're even seeing them just moving the boss right towards the embers so that they're able to get some good cleave damage in, rapidly getting it down. So it's very good control here. They're not letting anything linger here. They're not taking any big chances there. They're just making sure they're going right towards it, AoEing it all down, getting the good cleave damage that they can. Retro Fresh immediately is switching targets there to make sure that those mobs are getting down right away.
Yep, I do like the movement pattern of Free Marcy there, of course, dragging the boss over to the embers to make sure that they have effective cleave while not losing anything on Ash Golem himself. Team MP just now downing the Shivara. They will actually be moving on to Glazer first, our resident eyeball boss from the Legion, of course, hanging out there. Interesting fact, of course, his favorite band is the Black Eyed Peas. They will be pulling him momentarily here. The boss's mechanics here is that once he does shoot out those orbs, you do have to dodge them and then bait them, as they will target the closest player once they bounce off the wall. So you can actually bait those back into the boss check. We know how important that is on these damage check bosses.
Yeah, that's what you're gonna be looking at right here for MPE, as in the bottom screen right here, as they're moving those little balls back into it. So you're getting 2 hits there, and you're seeing one of them that just kind of skirts past. So overall, they're getting most of the bursts and stuff like that back into the boss. And that's what you want to be seeing, is just how well they're able to position, make sure they're moving back into the boss, adding a little bit of extra damage. We've seen that time and time again. A little bit of extra boss damage here and there. I mean, especially in the last series of Honestly versus Big Pull, it was just crazy how much a little bit extra boss damage was making a big difference. difference.
So Free Marcy does, of course, wrap up with Ash Golem. I do appreciate, again, their movement pattern there. They drag the boss to the entrance of the platform, making sure they save a couple of seconds. All movement, speed, abilities that could possibly cast here to get over to Glazer will be Team MP, of course, in the immunity phase now. Once this shield shatters, the boss will take 100% increased damage for, I believe, 12 seconds, if I'm not mistaken. So they want to use most of their CDs here. And, of course, we just spoke, Jack, importantly, redirect as many of these orbs back into the boss as possible during that period.
You're seeing MP is doing an exceptional job there of making sure they're doing just that. And Free Marcy is just beginning to engage with Glazer. So that'll be something you're definitely going to be watching for, is if they're going to be doing the exact same thing. Because, you're seeing it. They're knocking the boss down a very, very low percentage here, and hopefully MPE will be able to dodge the second protection phase, and they won't even have to worry about it.
That is, of course, the goal. Yes, it does take a long time to deal with that statue phase, as the boss does get immunity during it. There's just lost time period waiting for him to rotate his beam with the statues. Team MP should be able to just finish him off. They do have another death go down there. They are now up to 4 deaths, unfortunately. That's another plus 5 seconds on the clock. Luckily, that death... Oh, that was not worth the battle res there. The boss is already at 3% HP. I was actually just about to say how lucky it is that that death happened as the boss was dying anyway, but they do honestly kind of waste that battle res. Free Marcy working on their first immunity phase here on Glazer right now.
Yeah, especially because the checkpoint to get respawn is really not that far away. It's just right around the corner. You have a warrior, you can be pretty quick. Switch on Agrimars to get back to the boss really, really rapidly. So, I mean, you have to hope that it doesn't bite them later on, because they probably don't have another battle res for like 3 or 4 minutes.
It was honestly pretty equidistant too, because the time they had to travel back to the hall to get to Ash Golem matched the time of where they were released at the bottom of the elevator. Nonetheless, Free Marcy making very quick work of Glazer here. He should be going down momentarily while Team MPE is starting on Ash Golem. We will see his first brittle phase in a moment.
Yeah, but you're seeing Free Marcy, of course, is chewing through the last bits of Glazer's health pool here. You're seeing a lot of the different pools coming back really, really quick to deal a lot of damage to the boss.
Glazer going down here for Free Marcy now. Of course, these guys did not see eye to eye with each other, so they will be moving away in just a moment. Going towards the elevator, I do expect that they will skip the jailer, of course. And look, Jack, we gotta chill out with these eye jokes. All right, they're just getting cornier and cornier.
You would know best here. Free Marcy, of course, is dunking on the last boss there, and they're moving on towards the dark phase to go into towards Cordana. We've seen a couple of different pulls here to get past this mob right here, the jailer there. So you're seeing the distract going out, getting right past him, then going towards the elevator and getting the jump on, and of course using those volcanic potions. Unfortunately, not able to get all the way down, though.
One element of RNG in this entire expansion, of course, does not work out in their favor. Now, going back down the elevator is Team Free Marcy. Meanwhile, Ash Golem still being dealt with Team MP. It is just usually so effective to skip that jailer. He just has so much health. It's so inefficient to deal with just that solo mob. There's such a huge distance of traveling between where you finish with Ash Golem or Glazer and then getting all the way down to this dark area as well.
That, and you're able to just easily deal with other mobs later on. I mean, you're actually seeing Free Marcy has tons and tons of trash percentage here that they really just don't need to be killing any kind of extra jailer, especially one that has so much extra HP here. And as they're posturing for a very, very strong pull, it does look like they're kind of lagging behind.
I think they're in a prime position here to kind of skip the rest of this pack. What happens here, of course, these webs on the ground do damage to you if you go over them. So if you do Invispot or get stealthed by the rogue and you walk over one of those, it will break you out of stealth. And this is why and one of them did, in fact, this is exactly what happened. The rogue will run ahead with the light to make sure you clear that webbing, allowing the players to then stealth or Invispot behind him. They did it fairly cleanly. They pulled one extra mob. I don't think they needed the Brewmother, if I'm not mistaken. That last Spirit of Vengeance would have given them the percent and opened the door as well. Nonetheless, probably not too much time lost there as long as they move out of the Sanguine.
Well, it was good that they had the Brewmother, because they got you just at 99%. So, it was a pretty good move there, that it didn't really matter too much, but it was actually very nice how they were able to skip all those mobs, because they made very, very good time, not even having to really worry about it.
We did see in the last series, of course, Team Big Pull that did not work out for them when they tried that same skip. So Team Free Marcy here did, of course, execute it properly. Now they will be moving over to the final boss, Cordana, of the dungeon.
Yep, and you're seeing right here, they're making sure they drop the light bulb early. They're picking up the new light, the new flashlight here. Of course, it's going on the healers, pretty par for the course there, so that they're able to take care of any of the dark puddles. They're able to, quickly identify any of the invisible mobs and stuff like that, and quickly reveal Cordana.
Of course, Team MP is just now moving over to the elevator. They will be going down the stairs, down the elevator rather, down the chute. They do still have 11% to make up, so they'll have to pull certainly more than just the last boss. Wrath getting solo right at the beginning of the fight, just gets crushed. Luckily, just easily healed back up to full. Cordana melting. Of course, we do have 2 transition phases, one at 75%, one at 40%. At 75% coming up, she will spawn a shadow ad that will steal the light from players, and Cordana herself will disappear into the shadows. But as we know, Jack, the hunter is a huge advantage here. here as they can flare her out immediately, allowing for increased DPS uptime.
You're seeing Poom doing that immediately, making sure he's getting the flare out. She gets instantly revealed. They're getting the Avatar Shadow down. They're getting the light ball back. And then again, they're just laying into Cordana there. And you're really seeing, of course, you're like, oh my gosh, Blood Decay healing is just ridiculously amazing. But you're also seeing that it's a bit of trust here, where Zerace knows that he doesn't really have to bother healing the tank there, and you can just prioritize, doing as much damage as you can.
Yeah, certainly a bit of help, and of course the DK can flex with that extra leech from consumption every 45 seconds if they need to. 20% leech for the group. Cordana now getting closer and closer to 40% in the meantime. Team MP still dealing with the downstairs area. They seem to be doing all right. A bit low health here and there, but no extra deaths, no wipes or anything like that. They're moving to the final mob, the final Spirit of Vengeance, prior to opening the door.
Yeah, but you're seeing, Team MPE did not actually opt to do that similar skip. They needed that extra trash percentage. It might be like a little bit over percent, but it is definitely just showing the interest in different regions. You're seeing the different strategies they can kind of be coming up with and how you're most easily optimizing how you're going to be chewing through all these different mobs.
Right, you are, Jack. We do start our 40-second immunity phase now on Cordana, Creeping Doom, where she will spawn these 4 walls. Players will have to maneuver around through the gaps in the wall to make sure that they are not hit by the wall. That not only does a ton of damage, but does knock you back and can knock you off the platform to your death. That can only be revealed with the light now. Flare does not work anymore, so they're going through the 3rd wall here. 4th wall spawns amiably, and it also puts them in a position with that gap over there by the statue in the bottom right corner of your screen. That is always where the first trash monster spawns once the boss comes out of this phase, so they can easily stun it and make sure they can efficiently cleave the pair together.
And right there, you were seeing Zerace just immediately throws the light to that corner because they know that's exactly where it's going to be. That's the only place that they really have to worry about. The extra Avatar is going to come out, instantly gets stunned by the warrior there, and then takes off the immunity debuff from Cordana. Cleave goes down. You just see that death from above just instantly strike her down.
And they do spread out, of course, well for the Quaking. Cordana is just melting at this point. She should be going down in a moment for Free Marcy, who would then take the prize, because not only is Team MP behind on time, but they're also 4 deaths behind, which is another 20-second differential they would have to make up. The glaive does go out there in the meantime for Free Marcy, and another good dodge. And Cordana just melting down. This should be Free Marcy's free win here. They will be taking this first game 1-0.
Yeah, big win for Free Marcy and some big wins for the Pun Jar. Slooty.
Do we raffle that at the end of the week?
No. If anything, I got to tell you, even the jar wants you to stop. It's getting full. So we're down to our last $1. So you have one more pun.
My phone is gone already.
Yeah, well, just please be considerate.
So beautiful.
Say, you too can win the autographed penalty jar from the Mythic Dungeon Invitational.
Penalty.
But just please, well, I think actually.
Uh-oh.
I said penalty jar.
So we're out of puns now. We have no more money.
We also can't go to the bar tonight.
Ooh, unlucky. But pretty straightforward win for Free Marcy there. We kind of saw that with the earlier offering from China, and it's just they're taking it slowly. They're doing it diligently, but a lot of times the DPS just doesn't seem to be there. And the way they actually do the polls doesn't necessarily translating to winning a series like this.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of similarities, just like with the first game from MMT. Too much safety played by the 2 Chinese teams here today. It's costing them times, and then on top of it, a little sloppiness too. 4 deaths to 0. I mean, even if that gap was closed and they're both neck and neck on Cordana, that's still an extra 20-second differential that they need to make up.
Yeah, and you're seeing here just, well, it's saying, oh yeah, there's only a couple deaths, and there's only, some here and there. It really does make a huge difference because we're in the global finals now. We're in the global stage now. What may cut it for one region is not going to cut it on the global stage at all.
Yeah, and compliments to Free Marcy. We're talking a little bit about the struggles of Chinese region, but Free Marcy had a very clean run there. It's very clean, and honestly, it was pretty fast. It wasn't like they were just, slowly going about it methodically and not taking any deaths. They actually just played that one really well.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we've seen out of Free Marcy, where they've really stepped up their game by a large margin, where, we weren't particularly impressed with them. I mean, they were obviously a very good team in the APAC region, but the team honestly just was obliterating them. So now you're seeing a very well-rounded team and actually performing beyond my expectations.
And the skip was really well too. I cannot explain how many times I've seen groups try to do that skip in the dark phase, whether it's on live servers when we play, and we saw it here earlier in the dungeon too. It's so easy to screw that up.
Yeah, so as we were saying last weekend, we really wanted to see how Asia Pacific and China approached this series. Now knowing that they had the opportunity to go back and see how the other teams were doing it, how the other regions were doing it, what can they learn, what can they take from it and apply to their own game, and from what we're seeing from Free Marcy thus far, we like what we see.
So good. I'm definitely curious to see how this next game goes. Will they take it to a sweep? I want to see answers, those kinds of questions answered. Will they have the free sweep? And also, who is Marcy and why are they in jail?
Well,
at this rate, they're going to free her in no time, though.
I was gonna say maybe if they win, Marcy escapes.
They're playing for more than just the cash prize.
Wasn't there like a whole quest chain about this expansion? There's a lot of people in jail that you have to bust out, and Free Marcy.
Apparently so.
So okay, Free Marcy obviously got the win there. You know, do you expect them to really change anything up, or do you expect them to just kind of keep going forward? With what they have?
You know, why fix what isn't broken kind of thing.
Yeah.
That was a very dominant, clean performance from them, and I think they're just going to probably take that same comp into the next game. We'll have to see what map they end up picking in the end. Of course, we do still have the Tyrannical now with teaming on top of it, so I'd be less inclined to expect an upper Kara unless, you know, curveball style gets thrown out, so we'll have to see what they pick.
Yeah, MPE is actually going to be the one doing the choosing here, so it really is about what they think they can necessarily glean from this map pool that they can give them the edge. Because, you know, we saw Court of Stars today. There's always some safe picks in Darkheart Thicket, Nelts. I mean, yes, Tyrannical is there, but those are considered more standard safe picks.
I was going to say, we don't really know what we're going to be expecting out of China, because we have these, you know, pretty well-conceived notions of, like, you know, what US, what NA, what EU, you know, some of Oceanic are going to be picking and things like that. But, you know, time again, we've seen China have some really odd, you know, off-the-wall picks.
Like no rogue.
Like no rogue, exactly.
That is, I mean, and I think that's worth calling out, right? You know, it's one thing when you are out there just on live and you know, you're saying like, I want to play a certain class and I'm just going to play it and I'm going to do dungeons and it's going to be fun. That's fair. But, you know, when you get to a competitive level on the global stage, respect has to be paid to the power picks. The power picks are rogue. The power picks are arms warrior. There are power picks that you have to respect, and if you go away from them, like, look, it's great. Maybe you can play your class in a way that just gives you a significant margin to win the game, but the reality is these classes are getting picked over and over for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, you know, kudos to the Windwalker. Did very well. Damage was great. They had to clearly construct a pull pattern based on the fact that they did not have that mass stealth, which at the end of the day, it just saves so much time in most situations. So you're right. I mean, it's going to be kind of, you know, a disadvantage that they're going to have to deal with.
And it's not even that, like you were talking about, the Windwalker wasn't a bad pick in terms of the damage or anything like that, but the utility that comes in later. You know, you have to be bringing in certain special benefits here and there. We kind of talked about this a lot with healers, you know, where it's not just about how much healing can you put out. It's not just about how much damage you can put out. It's these little extra things that actually save so much time going forward.
And it's worth noting as we kind of, you know, break down the meta here, this is the first time we're doing an event like this, so obviously we're kind of learning the meta in real time with the rest of you, and it's not as if there are just picks that are just clearly tier 1 and then there's just a steep fall all the way down to classes you wouldn't pick or specs you wouldn't pick. There are, you know, tier 1s and then like tier 1.5s and then tier 1s in other direction depending on how highly you value battle reses. Why can I say that? How highly you battle mass stealth or value mass stealth. So there are certain ways you can go which you are not necessarily just strung in. You have to play certain things, but those certain things are incredibly powerful and definitely give you upside.
Yeah, we've definitely seen some groups have kind of some weirder comps. You know, I said the Arcane Mage thing a while ago, and they did exceptional, especially with the from the DK. So there's a lot of groups that make their comp work very, very effectively.
But it's not just about making it work, because what we're talking about, you were right, they do very, very even damage. I think we had like a lot of bolstering dungeons that were going on all at the same time, and they did a very, very good job just annihilating everything like that. But, you know, when we're looking at some of the things of what can you skip, what cannot you skip, you know, you're looking at, for example, we saw like a mage, for example, out of Nell Slayer who was able to pull one of the Scorpion mobs just before the last boss, so they only had to pull one Scorpion Pelter pack, and that was great, and they were able to add a little bit of extra skips there. But when we're looking at from instance to instance, you have to be finding something that, oh, you have Rogue's Mass Stealth. That's good for like everything there.
I know, you're just sitting there like, gosh, I want to play a class with mass stealth, but I don't want to play rogue. What can I play? Nope, it's just rogue at this point. But map picks are in for game number 2. So again, it's going to be on MPE to turn this around, see where they end up deciding to go. And
Else, there we go.
I am shocked and or appalled.
Yeah, well, I mean, we say that, but in the earlier series where we saw this come out, it was Court of Stars, right? Court of Stars was the pick. And Nelts has otherwise, up until this point, if you haven't seen the first 2 weeks of the Mythic Dungeon Invitational, people go to Nelts, man. It's just that, it's that place you feel safe. It's like that diner you've always known when you really want good food. You just stop in at Nelts. You get a friendly welcome from a guy who has a hammer that he probably shouldn't have. It's just a great time at Nelts, man.
Are you hungry right now? Or?
Actually, I've been sneaking off in between matches to go eat, so I'm pretty
that
well
jar
sated.
used to be full of candy.
Ah, that explains it.
Never any secrets from the desk. But yeah, Nelts Lair definitely speaks to the idea that MPE wants to play it safer, wants to play something that they're very well practiced on, and that's what Nelts has come to represent thus far in the tournament.
For sure. I mean, it's really difficult to throw a curveball with Nelts here, especially in a tyrannical setting. You know, a lot of the time we worry about Nelts with the Pelters and the Scorpions. That's what comes to mind, especially with the Fortified. So this is definitely a safe pick, something that they feel that they've practiced well and are just going to try to dominate just from a performance standpoint.
We've seen so many people run Nell Slayer, and again, it wasn't always like a first pick or something like that. I mean, it was usually the loser would be picking this map over and over and over again. And we were talking about like, oh yeah, it's teaming or it's fortified or it's any of these things, or maybe it's raging, but people really just didn't seem to care. This is an instance that people are so well practiced on, they're so efficient at, that it really just didn't matter at that point. It was just such a comfort pick for them that they were able to just absolutely annihilate it.
Yeah, I think that's worth pointing out. We've seen Nelts get picked in rain, shine, snow, sleet, upside down, 6 affixes. Nelts just gets picked. That's what it does, and it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. People have had so long. I mean, this was a 7-0 map, right? This is stuff people were testing in beta. People just know this map forwards and backwards, and there's very little room for surprise. So to that point, it kind of surprises me a little that we're seeing the Chinese team go there, because it doesn't seem like they were that close like we were seeing in like the last series, right? Second quarterfinal, it was just a game of inches. This really does feel like it's actually a game of yards. So to that point, I'm kind of surprised they don't choose to go somewhere else where they feel like they may have a pocket strat.
But we had a similar strategy from MMT, the other Chinese representative team, in the first series as well, choosing Darkheart Thicket, which is just similar to Nels, one of those kind of comfort picks. So maybe it's just, who knows, a regional thing that they just expect to perform these maps really well rather than throw their opponent off with something that they may have practiced but the others didn't.
That's an excellent point, Rob, that you made there, which is the fact that it's something that everybody's seen and everyone's really used to. So wouldn't this be something that's saying, oh, we're a better team than you, we're going to actually do this better? And that's one thing that we've seen time and time again, but we've seen, I mean, even back into APAC, we saw a lot of teams who thought, oh, this is going to be the curveball and this is going to be what's going to get us into the game, but this was going to be the other team's counter pick anyway, right?
Yeah, we'll have to see how it goes, but the composition's all ready for game number 2. Again, this is the tournament life on the line for not just this team, but the Chinese hope, so to speak. So anything you guys see in this that stands out?
Havoc.
Guardian. Chinese characters I can't read.
That's right.
I guess that would stand out.
No Rogue again.
Yes, no Rogue. And
that is
again, they're
worth
going
it.
back to the Havoc Demon Hunter here, so definitely is a very big surprise.
So they swapped the Windwalker to a Havoc Demon Hunter here, is what we're seeing. And the Guardian Druid swap from the Blood DK as well. I think those are definitely the notables here. Double Rusted Druid still going into it.
I mean, as we go into this, let's highlight again the issues for Team MPE in game number 1. The pulls were not as good as they needed to be, and the DPS was not there. There were a couple sloppy deaths, but I think those were not necessarily the paramount issues with what went wrong in that dungeon for them. So those are the things they need to clean up. They need to be able to make bigger pulls, and they need to have higher DPS. So based on those things, do we think this comp shores up the weaknesses?
I'm not really sure, because I think this dungeon, teaming, for Pelter pack, I think we've seen most of the series try to skip that pack, either with some tricks from Night Elves on Alliance or a Mass Stealth from a Rogue. They might playing Alliance, we'll have to see. I doubt it, you never know, but there's no Rogue here either, so I'm not really sure how a swap from Windwalker to Havoc is exactly going to fix some of those problems.
I think in many ways, it's just like you were talking about. I don't think it's really changing up what was a lot of the issues for them, because you have to keep in mind that it wasn't that MPE was playing poorly or anything like that. I mean, the big errors there, they didn't have clean pulls, they didn't have very few, or they had a few deaths, and that was definitely counting against them. But at the same time, they also didn't have any fancy stealths. They were pulling over mob count. They didn't really have any of these little advantages that Free Marcy did.
And these little advantages, we've really belabored the point on. These little advantages have added up more and more as we've gotten deeper into the tournament. And at this point, these little advantages are the situations that are making the game, right? It's the starting the RP with one character while you're still clearing the rest, right? It's pulling the boss towards the area you have to go to. And all these little advantages have really added up. So I want to see Team MPE actually embrace some of this.
I think it's going to be really make or break right out the gate here. We talk so much about, do we do that huge pull with everything right before Rockmora, the first boss? Or are we going to kind of slow it down, do a 2-pull, and then go around the side with some of those ritualisks?
I think MPE has to make those big pulls. I think they have to make these big pulls or they're going to be going home.
Yeah, it's all coming down to this. MPE has to get a win, has to tie up the series, or else they are done, China is done, and then it becomes a 3-region Mythic Dungeon Invitational. But, as I said, heading over to Good Times Nelts, where you can come in, get your rock pelters, get your giant worms, wrestle a man with a hammer. It's just great times. Gentlemen, have at it.
Doctors hate them.
Going down the water slide, of course, we have Free Marcy in the top with the red border here. Also enjoying a slippery water slide is Team MP at the bottom with the blue border.
So the first thing to see, of course, Jack, as we just discussed, is the very first pull here. We do have teaming, so there's going to be, we'll see just how big they go. Free Marcy's running right through this. We'll see if they have a little pause or not. With teaming, though, we are going to have 2 of those Hulks in the back. Those are very, very dangerous mobs. They do have a punt forward on the tank, and then a frontal cone. It looks like they're pulling everything here, so they're going to have to control them really well after those fracture punts right here, right now. Seeing if those... Okay, good. So excellent. They do need to interrupt those. It's a ton of damage on the tank, even if it's just on the tank, making sure it doesn't clip some of the melee too.
Huge damage coming out of both sides here, and like I said, this is what we're talking about. We want to see these huge pulls because this is something that we have to do, and this is something we've constantly been seeing out of some of the best teams, regardless of the region, that regardless of the affix, regardless of what's going on, they were making these really big pulls and they were making it work. So it's very good to see both teams, starting off with this and really taking no prisoners.
Yeah, pretty neck and neck are both teams at the moment. Of course, there is a lurker worm that has spawned because those do burrow and pop up in a random location at a player. So by being out of position, one of the range there on Free Marcy has spawned the worm in the back. They do have to backtrack there and kill. They don't have the DK for that grip. In the meantime, Team MP here, we can see some of the Arms Warriors break down there with the gear and the talents as Team MP is cleaning up some of this last trash, getting ready to move down to Rockmora.
Yeah, no surprise to see the Warglaives coming out for the Warrior there. I mean, we've seen it out of some healers too. This is such a flexible, useful trinket that whenever you're having these huge mob pulls, taking advantage of the Warglaives is just really going to be super effective here.
For sure. So we do see that Team MP has, of course, started the RP prior to engaging Rockmora. Rockmora himself, of course, does have a couple abilities. The main one we do need to watch out for are these skitters that he spawns based on damage taken. The more that are active during his AoE smash, the more damage it will do, Jack. You know how much damage that could do to the group.
It's very scary, and you're seeing a very good job by the tank getting all these skitters right into his face, making sure there's very good room for cleave. The Warrior and the Demon Hunter are able to lay into it super hard here. So when you're seeing this huge smash that's going to come out for Team MPE here, people dropping so low because they had those skitters out, and people almost dying there is very scary. But you're also seeing, the Rested Druid for Team MPE doing a lot of damage, so they weren't really having any kind of pre-hots or anything like that was really going to be bringing them back there.
You're almost guaranteed to always have one skitter that spawns last moment before he does his AoE, so you have to bank on the fact that there's always going to be one, but having two could prove to be lethal for some groups. Here's another shatter coming up. They do have 3 of those out right now. Warrior
so
almost going down right now. They have to get those down a bit better while rotating the boss around the room, making sure they're avoiding those poison puddles on the ground to make sure that the melee DPS have access not only to the boss, who has a massive hitbox, but also the skitters that will innately be drawn to the tank.
Yeah, and you're seeing it taking forever for them to get those skitters down. They have 3 skitters active right now. One is about to drop off, but still having 2 skitters up right now. They're very high health. Actually, they did get one down just in time. Right before it. So, but having that extra one up, just would have just destroyed them here. So it's pretty sloppy so far, and you're not really seeing as much cleave as you really would have hoped.
Yep, Team MP, Free Marcy rather, of course, not behind. We do have Zerace go down and get Zeraced from the screen right now. Rezzed immediately up. One of their battle reses does go down as a result, plus an extra 5 seconds on the clock. Both teams almost neck and neck. Rockmora about 8-9% behind for Free Marcy, plus that death on top of it. We're going to have an almost probably a wipe here for Team MP. It looks like one of those shatters was just too much to handle. I don't know if they want to keep going with just a tank and a healer combo. Eventually those skitters will mount up to allowing them to wipe. I think it's more effective. Okay, they do get a res up. I don't know, at this point it might be more effective to just go again. They do get the second res up right before the shatter, and the Hunter goes down again.
They had the battle res there on their Hunter, and then they had the other DPS just sitting on the battle res and not using it yet. So now the Warrior's going up. So it looks like there was some kind of miscommunication where the Hunter's like, oh yeah, I'll get up immediately, and he didn't even have a personal that ready to handle that.
Yeah, that was definitely poorly communicated. The Warrior standing in some of the poison there, going down quite low. Luckily, it does not go down again for Team Epic. But yeah, Jack, that was just poorly communicated. I mean, you know how much damage they did. You know they got one shot a few times already, and the Hunter comes up without his own personal. He doesn't have turtle. I don't know if he called for a cooldown, but he just goes down. I mean, you can't sit at 60% on one of those smashes and expect to live.
Yeah, but now you're having a disaster situation by MPE. They're actually having the tank going down. This will be a full wipe on Team MPE's part, and that's just something that you can't have. I mean, it already was going to be a bad situation if you're going to try to tough it out with just a tank and a healer and taking forever to down a boss. But now they have to get back there. They have to start all over again.
Right, you are. Today we spell wipe MPE as they come down. They will have to run all the way back to Rockmora. Not only, everything you just said, Jack, plus they wasted 2 battle reses trying to salvage the situation. That didn't work out at all. Free Marcy having a massive lead now going down the waterfall. They will have this huge open area here to deal with. Of course, a lot of groups we do see either do a mass pull here or they opt to skip a lot of the starter pack area, but therefore will have to make some percentage later on.
It's kind of disturbing to see, Team MPE's wipe, because the whole focal point, the whole issue with their wipe to begin with was just the fact that they were not cleaving as well as they could have. They were not getting those skitters down very rapidly. They were not switching targets well. They were trying to worry too much about, their little individual cleave and things like that. So it was very disappointing to see there. And you're seeing another death on the part of Team MPE.
I think he might have hit a rock on the way down. I mean, with Rockmore, this boss, they are certainly between a rock and a hard place. Free Marcy now pulling up to what is the right before the dreaded Pelter pack. We do know on teaming that there are 4 Pelters rather than the 2. We'll see if they opt to skip this pack in just a moment.
I think Team MPE, the DK killed their Demon Hunter because they had Path of Frost on, and he landed on the
That's something I do on live server.
Yeah. So it's very, very rough communication. Of course, you know, Free Marcy is having a very, very huge lead here as they're getting more of these larger mobs down. They're moving towards the teaming Pelters, the very scary and annoying mobs. But we've constantly seen, I mean, Free Marcy especially, how cleanly they've actually been able to deal with this. Having their Guardian Druid able to run in, get a focus on all the mobs, and then start kiting them out as they start jumping out. But you're seeing here the Ursula's Vortex getting all of the Pelters back in when they need to, getting them super, super low. So it's very well played.
Yep, they just pop a bunch of CDs there, make sure they kill that horrible pack. Now we will, of course, have 2 more Hulks to deal with, 1 here and then 1 just up the ramp prior to the second boss, Ularog. Once again, Jack, we discussed these Hulks are very, very dangerous, but so are the Shapers that are now with them, one of the new trash monsters that we did not see prior to the first boss. They do constantly cast stone bolts on various targets on the party, so it is important to have good communication and a stun or interrupt rotation on the Shaper to make sure that we don't have too much damage spilling out. In the meantime, Team MP, of course, in the bottom right, is still working on Rockmora. They're just halfway through, but I mean, things are looking pretty rocky for them right now.
Indeed they are. I mean, you've seen Free Marcy did a very, very excellent job of focusing down. Oh, Team MPE is dropping very, very low here, but Free Marcy was doing a very good job of making sure they were getting those Shapers down. So right here is just making sure that Team MPE is able to get the focus and being able to take down the Pelters that they need to, because I mean, we're about to have another, just the AoE burst there, and so we have a little bit of time to be getting these 2 Pelter mobs down very quickly before, of course, the next smash is going to be coming out here. So it's very, very imperative for them to get that much damage on. And again, 3 going down here for MPE, and it's going to be looking like it's going to be another wipe going out on their part.
I mean, they certainly don't have the battle reses. We know that for sure. They've already used 2 of them. I think they have 1 more in
the BM Hunter.
Yeah, okay, the tank does go down. Another full wipe for Team MPE. They're really going to have to kind of get themselves together and do a proper pull on the boss and down him. At this point, they're just got to be hoping that Team Marcy is going to be wiping. But I mean, we know that these players are probably previewing on the second monitor or what have you at home, making sure, keeping an eye on the other team. Free Marcy knows how ahead they are at this point, so they can opt to take it even a bit safer and probably win this match and not have to risk any wipe whatsoever.
And that's the thing with Free Marcy, that they have this, you know, kind of clarity. They're saying, okay, well, let's just play our game. Let's play efficiently. We're not worried about, you know, having this maximizing their time. You know, you're not playing, you know, one of the absolute top dogs here. I mean, you're having a team that just wiped up against you. And this is something where you really just can play conservatively. You can play safe. And I mean, at MPE's part, we just want to make sure that they're not using Path of Frost to kill their members again.
Well, I mean, maybe they want to, but you know, you really got to wonder. I mean, this is Team MPE's map pick. They certainly must know what happens with that boss and how much damage is amplified on a 17 Tyrannical by those skitters, and they're just doing, it's not like you don't have the damage with a warrior, with a Havoc Demon, or with anyone there to kill those skitters. They're just being lazy about it.
Yeah, but and it was even the thing where we have the time to practice. Like, you know, the maps are known, the setup's known, the affixes are known. These things, it comes down to practice, making sure you're coordinating with your group. And we kind of saw there with MPE where their warrior was starting to focus on the skitters, and then it didn't really look like the Havoc or the Hunter really were helping out too much with it. So, you know, that was one thing, is just the miscommunication that's going on and the lack of focus that really is coming in on their part. It's really hurting them.
And you can tell, you know, typically in a lot of the Notharian's Lair in prior series, prior weeks, we did see that this room was usually a huge pull by a lot of teams. You know, get everyone in, Guardian, huge damage, and you just saw they took it 1 pack at a time right now for Free Marcy. They must be in a very comfortable position right now, and they're pulling it safe and playing it safe. Of course, we have now started on Ularog. His breath gets hit really hard with the Sunder there. Ularog, the second boss, which does have a big nature tank damage spike, and of course has this hand ability, is a very, very handsy boss. You want to make sure you move out of the way with that, otherwise it will do a ton of damage. And at 100 energy, he will go downstairs for everyone's favorite ball under the cup game.
My favorite totem.
I hate it.
Favorite totem game. So he will spawn a number of different totems around him, and then of course he will have the center totem. What you're going to be looking for here is tracking that center totem, because that is where he's going to be hiding behind here. And of course you're having another death going out on the part of Team MPE. So it just still is kind of compounding upon itself as Free Marcy is going after these totems.
I mean, the Hunter, that has to be the most convincing case of feigned death I've ever seen in my entire playing career of World of Warcraft. He's just, the boss is fooled, I'm fooled, he's just lying on the floor eating some dirt. In the meantime, Free Marcy, In the meantime, Free Marcy, of course, does guess the right idol, DPS it down. I do like how the tank is moving here, of course. Brath is doing an excellent job of rotating the boss by 90 degrees once he does spawn those idols in the first phase to make sure that everything's nice and stacked for cleaving.
Yeah, but you're seeing again, Team MPE, I mean, if they didn't have DPS problems before with getting the skitterers down in time, I mean, they're definitely having it now. They're having another death happening on the Warrior's part. And you're even seeing the rest of Druid just trying to go into bear form, pop any kind of personals, keep himself alive. And again, it just looks like it's going to be another wipe. And it definitely is just kind of shocking to see that this is their pick. This is something that they've had time to practice on for the tournament realms, and they're just failing at it.
The big problem is not only were they mishandling the skitterers with all of their DPS alive, now they're missing 2 of them. They're just going to fall completely behind on skitterers, and eventually they will just get one shot. I mean, that Havoc Demon Hunter can only survive so long. Free Marcy, of course, going over to their second phase of ball under the cup here, or ball under the idol, I suppose, in this case. But based on their damage, I think they're actually going to get a third, quite sure, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it may just be that they're waiting for cooldowns to come up or something along those lines. I mean, again, they're chasing after the idol here, but you might be right where they might actually be losing out on. They might end up having to go to a different, to a third phase here. But even if they do, it's not even something that's that big of a deal. I mean, hopefully it'll be sort of a wake-up call to make sure that they're, not being lazy, not being, not getting complacent here, because it's not over until you've crossed that finish line there. So it's very important to kind of lay on that extra damage when you can, get that kind of cleave damage here. It does look like overall the DPS is fairly low, so it might just be something where cooldowns are coming back up, or as the boss is, of course, getting more and more towards execute range, they'll pick it up.
It is possible that some of the members of Free Marcy have now gone to their refrigerator to get a snack. Of course, we do see the healer going down for Team MP at the moment as well. The Blood DK can stay alive through all of this. I mean, their self-healing is incredible, but to have to solo DPS the boss at 30% health on a 7 Tyrannical will take a phenomenal amount of time. Certainly more efficient for them to just wipe, come back and pull the boss again, unless this Havoc can manage to stay alive the whole time, which so far they're doing at the moment. They do have a bit of support from the consumption from the Blood DK there. Free Marcy, of course, trying to clean up Ularog here prior to having another down phase. Unfortunately, they do not manage to do that. He does go down at 10% as we predicted for the final guessing phase here.
Yeah, but it looks like, getting that extra snack and stuff like that, getting that extra drink, definitely hurt them. So, I mean, it's something that kind of check themselves as, they're looking to go forward, hopefully going forward here, making sure that they're going to be picking that up, because when they're going against these higher tier teams, they're not going to be able to get away with having that low of damage.
No, not at all. Free Marcy, I would assume, guesses the right idol. Of course, I knew it was that one all along. Just wanted to make sure everyone else at home was guessing. I didn't want to give you a hint. Ularog should be going down here momentarily for Free Marcy, after which they will, of course, be moving to that 5-pack after the second boss. That is usually a 3-pack. It looks like the Havoc Demon Hunter has finally gone down for Team MPE. The Blood DK standing tall, standing his ground. Not sure at this point exactly what their communication is. It's probably very violent and angry, but I would assume the DK at this point is perhaps just going to try to solo the boss. Something DK should easily be able to handle. Is just going to take a ton of time.
Yeah, and time is something that they don't have right now. I mean, even though they're able to take advantage of, just AoE-based trinkets, it looks like they might be having the shock baton that they're taking advantage of here. It definitely is just, this is something that is still kind of baffling to me, where they're, wiping on the boss that they picked, the very first boss that they picked, whereas Free Marcy's having these large pulls, they're having these efficient pulls, and they're able to show that, they're able to get these mobs down when they want to.
I have just received word that there are police waiting outside for Rockmora due to this murder on the screen that you're seeing right now, but Team MP still trying their best to deal with that. Meanwhile, Free Marcy moving over to start the trash, moving over to Naraxis, the third boss, which is our favorite Worm boss, of course.
Oh, the favorite worms indeed. I mean, this malicious manhandling by Rockmora on Team MPE is just too much to handle here. So moving to Free Marcy here, of course, they're getting a lot of the grub masters down. It'd be important to watch out for those very, very scary grubs before they metamorphosize. Yeah,
definitely. You do have to hard CC them by either a disorient or a stun. A displacement like a grip does not work, nor can you, kick them or silence them. That doesn't work. Otherwise, they will transform into an extra worm that are quite irritating to deal with, gripping melee all over the place, gripping all players all over the place, and of course, dropping the pool under it. They will pull the rest of the room here. Should be pretty easy to deal with. I mean, they have a substantial amount of AoE damage. The Guardian, of course, going pretty big there, helping down DPS down all of those mobs, and they will be pulling Naraxis.
It was a very swole pull there by Free Marcy there, and they have a couple grubs, and you're seeing them there trying to add a little bit of extra damage. They're not really worrying about them too much until they start their cast. They're getting all those down in short order. It's a good thing that Team MPE had not actually had this issue on Naraxis, because if you look at the crowd surrounding Naraxis, just all the other spectators going on, I mean, it's glad that they don't really have much of an audience there.
Yeah, so I have just have just returned from going to the bathroom for about 20 minutes. We do see that Team MP Blood DK is still working on Arkmora. Should be able to get that down. As we said earlier, it will take a while for him to solo this. However, he has reached a cap on damage from these explosions. He'll never have more than 3 or 4 of these skitterers at a time. As long as he survives every hit here, there are 4 up this time. As long as he survives every hit here, which he easily should be able to do, it should be no problem. We do see that he is, of course, also using Archimon's Trinket, allowing him that absorb every 75 seconds. This is just going to take a while at this point. In the meantime, Free Marcy is already working on Neuraxis in the bottom. Notable mechanics here, of course, are those spectators that you spoke of, Jack. They do jump down in pairs, and if they reach the boss and eventually are not killed, and they are eaten by the boss, after which Neuraxis will gain. Oh, we do have a death going down from Arrow. They should have a battle res. There it is, no problem. The boss will gain a 50% damage increase for the rest of the fight if they fail to kill those mobs. Also, if the tank fails to run away properly for the Spike Tongue, which we should be seeing coming up soon at 100 energy.
Yep, and you're seeing right here, I mean, Free Marcy's doing a very good job of making sure to keep me everybody topped. You're talking about the Spike Tongue is coming out, so Brath does use his Druid Roar so that he's able to jump into this pool. The pool will slow, of course, his movement speed down so that he's not going to be getting dragged into it. Team MPE, or should I say Team Blood DK, is finally getting Rockmora down. Finally taking him down solo. Blood DK, exceptional job.
I'm pretty sure at this point he's going to be taking all of the prize money for himself and not sharing it with any of his teammates. Finally, Rockmora does go down. They will be able to start their very fun barrel ride down the river. I'm sure they'll have much to discuss while next to each other in said barrels. But of course, all eyes on Free Marcy at the moment, substantially ahead. There's virtually no way they can lose this dungeon at this point, especially because they have the luxury of playing it safe now.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the luxury of playing it safe, and that's one of the focuses that they want to have here. Just keep grinding the boss down, keep focusing on the ads, keep focusing on their fundamentals here, because that was the biggest thing that wiped Team MPE is they just got away from their fundamentals. You know, the fundamental mechanics of the boss. It's not even any crazy positioning. It's not even any crazy abilities or things that you have to watch out for. It's just AoEing specific mobs down, focus targeting things. These are all things that need to be practiced anyway for getting specific trash packs down. It's just something that they utterly failed on for the first boss.
Right, you are, Jack. So, of course, the Toxic Wretch coming out from Neuraxis now, a constant AoE that dots the entire group and puts puddles down, making it very tough for Melee to find a spot open to DPS at because the boss is indeed immobile. The healer will have to pay attention to that. In the meantime, we're almost at 20% on Neuraxis, meaning that she will, or he will, gain an extra 20% permanent damage as a soft enrage for the rest of the encounter until it's killed off. You can see these Devouts coming down, being cleaved well, and DPS before they split up, so they get a ton of damage on them, and we should have another Spike Tongue coming up not too long from now.
Team MPE going quickly through all those Pelter packs. I guess they had a lot of cooldowns available to them since they were sitting on them for a couple minutes.
Yes, all their hour-long cooldowns did come up. I can't confirm this.
And of course, we're able to see them as they're just trying to chain pull, trying to get something going here. But Neuraxis is at 9% here for Free Marcy, going down very, very rapidly as he's trying to eat up that little kitty there of Wrath, and Wrath getting right back onto the boss, taking him down, and they are approaching, of course, Dargul, the last boss here.
Yes, of course, does well there to get back to the boss prior to the Spike Tongue fully ending. Otherwise, the boss can turn around and melee one of the melee nearby and one-shot them, so it's important for the tank to blanket taunt on their way back in. They will be moving over to the right side, opting not to deal with that third Scorpion that we see some teams pull depending on their pull pattern and percentage they want, and they'll be going down through the middle here with a couple of extra Pelters, and then soon enough we'll have to deal with those 2 Scorpion packs prior to Dargul.
Yeah, you're interested to see if Team MPE and the effort, I guess you could say, that they're going to be putting in, if they're even going to be bothering with any large trash pulls, if they're even going to be focusing on anything large here. So overall, they're just pulling a couple mobs as Free Marcy is clearing out the remainder of the trash that is required of them. Again, it is teaming, so Free Marcy does have to play pretty careful with these Scorpion and Pelter packs that are coming up here.
Yeah, they just have to play it safe. And, I mean, you ask, are they going to do any big pulls? There's just no reason. They know they're ahead at this point. They can also now wipe 2-3 times and still be ahead because of how many times Team MP not only wiped, but also tried to kind of slowly kill the boss after an almost full wipe. So Team MP is substantially behind at this point. Free Marcy pulling the first of the Demolisher packs here. You can actually interrupt these before they cast their Char Skin, and if you do so, they will not transform into this giant form.
Yeah, and you're seeing, we were even talking about how, you do have those disaster situations where it doesn't even take a wipe to cause problems. You can even have times where you just drop a DPS or 2, and then you're still having to grind away the boss because you don't have a battle res available or something like that. You're seeing Team MPE doing an extremely ambitious an aggressive pull here, getting all those pelter packs together, trying to AoE him down in a very desperate play just to be able to do anything they can to kind of get themselves caught up back in the game here.
Yeah, well, you know, they did pull a bit safe too. I mean, they dealt with that Hulk pack prior to pulling the rest, Team MP here, but of course they are pulling it, and we do see a death go down from the Hunter. Again, cast Feign Death very convincingly, is rezzed immediately, and they will continue doing some damage on the boss as they still have to do with that mass amount of trash in the meantime. Free Marcy, of course, going over to the last Scorpion pack here. For those at home, why are they not pulling the boss with the Scorpion pack? We do have another death from Team MP in the corner. I'm just tired of saying it, so I'm going to let that one go for a moment. But Free Marcy, of course, you're asking at home, why do they not just pull the boss with the Scorpions? The boss will actually automatically pull all the trash in his kind of lower platform area here, including Scorpions, so you do want to deal with them, get them out of the way. Team MP looks like they're headed for Wipe City at any moment now as well.
Yep, and you see, I mean, even as they're having to deal with the totem game, they still have more trash mobs up. You know, they were not able to keep all the trash, you know, solidified, kept together. Another death's going down, and again, you have the same thing that happens. You have boss is up, healer and the tank are the only ones left alive. And
I think this could take a while for that Blood DK to likely have to re-solo that boss. Free Marcy now dealing with the rest of the trash and getting ready to pull Dark Gruul, the final boss here. I think the DK is just opting to finish it off at this point. There's too much damage to deal with. They will be all having to run back. They did kill the trash though, which is, I guess, a consolation prize.
Yes.
But they will have to run all the way back and now re-engage Ularog. In the meantime, Free Marcy already starting on Dark Gruul, the final boss. Notables here are he does do crystal spikes, usually about 3 every rotation of his 100 energy. These are important for 2 reasons. One is this molten char skin that he spawns does need to be put through that wall. Once he does that, once he gets put into that wall, he will take 100% increased damage during his stun duration. Very important for players to be able to burn him down. And of course, Dark Gruul does have a frontal with the landslide that you want to make sure that you not only do not point towards the party, but once you return, you have to have your active mitigation up as the tank. Otherwise, you will take increased damage and get punted away.
I mean, you've seen right here, I mean, at this point, it's just about adding as much damage as you possibly can, getting your positioning organized correctly. You're going to have another char skin coming out and being able to just toss that into the wall like you were saying here. And overall, it's just right off the bat, you're trying to make sure you're stacking all your little crystal spikes together. You have a pretty solid wall that you're able to, you know, get all of your char skins into the same place, be positioned around them so that all the fixates will be there. And again, you're going to see the large AoE coming out from Dark Gruul in just a second here. So they're positioning the boss. That way they'll still be able to hit through the spikes. Retro Fresh taking quite a bit of damage there, but he gets himself positioned properly so that he can still DPS the boss through that magma wave.
Right, you are. I do like very much, Jack, as you mentioned, that they move the boss over to the wall prior to that magma wave to make sure that the melee still have 100% active uptime, DPSing him during his immobile phase there. Well done on Molten Char Skin, spawning it directly into that crystal wall, and then they're going to be burning it down with that 100%.
I mean, you're seeing right here, just moving away from Volcanic, watching out for any of the walls that are coming up, you know, taking down the char skin as rapidly as you can. It was a very, very good move, like you were saying, making sure that the char skin spawns immediately on that wall so they don't even have to worry about it. They don't have to waste an extra wall or anything like that. They just instantly are able to jump on it, have that focused target that Team MPE was lacking, and get it down very, very rapidly.
Of course, we're full screen here now because there are several members of Team MP currently being loaded into ambulances, unfortunately, after the punishment they've received from that second boss. Free Marcy should have free reign here in order to not only finish off this series, but as we spoke to Rob earlier, finally free Marcy.
Astounding to see Marcy freed once again. We're all very proud of it. But what would the team be named now that Marcy is free?
I think they would change it to Freed Marcy.
Freed Marcy.
Yep, that would make most sense to me. Not too invasive on, of course, their title for any future sponsors and any paraphernalia that they've already built and constructed. Now, they didn't do as, I was actually going to say, they didn't do as well of a job dragging the boss over to the wall here, but they do still have a bit more time prior to his magma wave phase.
You're right here seeing the char skin's actually going to come out right again, and it does spawn immediately on top of the wall. So very good timing there, and then they have, you know, the last crystal spikes before the next magma wave.
I do think that Molten Char Skin they could have just ignored. I mean, the boss was low enough, and it looks like they're kind of opting to do so. They might just kill them both at the same time, but it looks like Free Marcy is going to dominate here, and they're going to sweep this series 2-0 with a very dominant performance.
Yikes. That was a game. That was a game we saw. So obviously, you know, coming into this, we kind of talked about some of the teams that hadn't performed as strongly were going to need to do some serious work. They're going to need to do some soul searching, watch some videos of the other teams, you know, look at how they could improve their performance. And I mean, that's not the caliber what we saw from MPE that you really expect to see at this point in the tournament, especially on Nelts. We went into this and we talked about Nelts is the warm safety blanket. That's where you go where bad things don't happen to you. And as we saw, all kinds of bad things happen to MPE, but That's going to do it for them. It's going to do it for China's 2 teams in this tournament. I do want to point out, though, that as much as Free Marcy won, and good for them, they're advancing to the semifinals, their DPS was in that specific game was really not where we need to be seeing it if they're going to have a legitimate shot in the semifinals.
True, but I think the flip side to that is they're probably quite aware that they were half a dungeon ahead of the other team. So, I mean, you could see even with the pulls leading up to Ularog, the second boss, they were pulling one mob at a time, sometimes one pack at a time, playing extremely safely. But, I mean, MPE, I don't know what to say. They were first seed in China, so they actually played pretty decently in the China qualifiers, of course. I don't know what happened today. You know, it could have been nerves got to them, but I mean, like Jack was saying earlier, these were not. This wasn't a gamble wipes from them. It's not like they pulled half the instance in desperation, you know, tried to do it and it didn't work, something outside their comfort zone. These are just basic mechanical checks that they were failing.
Right, and talking about, it seems like we're being harsh on MPE, and you at home watching this, I don't want you to think we are. It's just, we saw MPE in that first game. You know, they put up a respectable performance on Vault of the Wardens, which is arguably, with those affixes, a more difficult dungeon. But they actually just performed better. So we know they're capable of performing at a much better caliber. This was just a situation where they never got there.
No, absolutely. I do think that they performed very well in the first dungeon. I think in this one what happened is, you know, I think it was just a psychological thing. Nerves got to them, frustration got to them after that first wipe, and it was just kind of unraveled at that point.
Well, the scary thing to think about is that Team MPE was seed 1. They beat MMT. And we were always talking about growing and getting better and better and better. And we saw game 1, Free Marcy. I mean, we were talking about the second game, they didn't really have that great at DPS, but game 1, they had very impressive DPS, they had very impressive pulls, you know, very impressive just as they were able to skip all those mobs and things like that.
I thought the jar was on the table, so I'm just
No, the jar's actually gone to cover MP's medical expenses. So.
But it was scary that they didn't seem to pull any kind of extra practice in. They weren't really actually cleaning anything up that was actually plaguing them in the Chinese qualifiers 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, like we said, there was a lot that some of these teams were going to have to learn. And this was not just aimed at China. This was aimed at Asia Pacific. Frankly, this was aimed at North America. We all kind of looked at Raider.io as setting the pace that other people are going to need to meet. So we are seeing some of these teams thus far that are left in the Invitational. They're rising to the occasion, and we're seeing some of these teams that are, as you said, Salute, kind of crumbling a little bit under the pressure.
Yeah, it's just like you said, you know, I mean, respect MP, they have played well up to that point. We know they can perform better than that by miles. But, I mean, something just fell apart there and didn't work out. They've proven that they can play well, that they can hang with the best, but that game just slipped away from them.
And as you said, what we saw was not them taking gambles, right? It was not them making super ambitious pulls. It was very simple mechanical checks that if you were running this at home, right? If you were running this at home with friends, with a pub, whatever, you would have to pass in order to beat the dungeon, and that's just kind of what it came down to. So overall in this tournament, I want to say, you know, very much enjoyed watching the Chinese teams and what they brought to this tournament. And certainly as we look towards the future of Mythic dungeon-based tournaments, there's a lot of room for them to grow, and there's a lot of ceiling for them, which is great.
Especially as we're having future Mythic Dungeon Invitationals here, we're able to see this kind of grow globally. You know, how much more seriously, people can expect these in the qualifiers here, because we were able to see, you know, in China, for example, there was a lot of the 2-1s, you know, the team that lost, the next game that they picked, they always kept winning, and we kept seeing that over and over and over again. So it's one thing, you know, future events, you know, where we're able to see China kind of grow and get a lot more efficient with these with their pulls, and that'll be the interesting thing is as they are getting closer and closer to Europe, closer and closer to NA, and even, you know, resembling a team like Honestly, which has just been so impressive on the global stage.
Yeah, well, looking at the next match, Raider.io versus Friends with Affixes. So before we go to break, I do want to kind of talk to you guys and see if you have any thoughts on that one. We saw Raider.io, as I said, they put on a clinic. They were the best team we have seen thus far in the tournament, no questions asked. Premonition, honestly, just clearly a tier behind them is what it felt like. Do we think Friends with Affixes, this was kind of a weird team that we saw over the course of the North American broadcast. They got better with every series, right? They were cleaning up their play in real time. Do we think they stand any chance against Raider.io?
I think this is going to be a perfect example to see if they use their time to prepare well, because they can certainly get a lot going and start to perform really well. I mean, we're just going to have to see. So can they hang out with Raider.io in these? Probably. But it just depends how much work they put in, because if they put in no work, Raider.io is just going to sweep them.
Jack, any thoughts?
We saw the team Honestly go up against EU and perform extremely well against Team Big Pole. And that was something that, for many people it seemed like it was more of an upset that an EU team would actually lose to an Oceanic team. So I think right here you have a very good opportunity to see, Friends of Affix, like you said, they kept on growing, they kept on practicing, they kept on getting better. They were able to really break down the problems that they were having, like you said, in real time. So they've had a whole week to prepare, to watch EU, to watch, how Raider.io operates. So I'd like to see them put up a good fight. I'd like to see a 2-1.
Yeah, well, one quarterfinal left in the day before we head to the semifinals tomorrow. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, it is going to be Raider.io taking on Friends with Affixes. Welcome back to the Mythic Dungeon Invitational. We are here with the fourth and final quarterfinal of the day. Joining me on the desk is my good friend Trekkie, and of course, Rich, who is also my good friend too. So we're both all,
we're all good friends.
We're all good friends too. Yeah.
I'm excited for this one as well. We had a really good series earlier today that Trekkie and I got to cast, and now jumping into this next one, I think it's going to be just as exciting. Raider.io definitely going to be the favorite here. I don't think there's any denying that, but we have a pretty strong NA team that's going to be teeing up against them.
Yeah, as you said, Raider.io, when we saw them perform, there's the tier some of the best teams are performing at in this event, and then there's Raider.io just up there. They're clearly the favorites, although I'm excited about watching Friends with Affixes because this is a team that over the course of last weekend, quarterfinals, frankly, they looked bad. Semifinal, they advanced, they beat key dampeners. Semifinals, we start to see them clean up some of the play, tighten up some of the execution-based errors, and then they go to the finals against Premonition, and Premonition was an incredibly powerful, good team, and they were getting better, right? They were cutting down on the deaths, they were making better decisions, so while I do expect Raider.io to take this series, I think there is a chance that Friends with Affixes surprises us.
Yeah, they're going to have to do a lot more than just play cleanly to beat Raider.io. They're going to have to do clean and fast as well. One thing that we've seen a lot, we talk about a lot about Raider.io. They're very, very favorite. They did very well against the Proving Grounds, pretty far above the other teams. However, we haven't seen from them completely dominating and destroying in terms of speed. They just do really clear, really smooth runs, and on those high keys, that's very, very important. And as long as the other team mess up, then they will definitely just take it. So we'll see if we'll see more of the push from Raider.io, which I'm more hopeful for.
Well, I think one of the things that we could definitely see this time around is not necessarily a bloodbath like we saw in the last series, right? That was one of the things where you do see a team wiping a whole bunch, and that's the reason they lose. That happens, right? That's going to be a thing that we see more in the tournament as well. Maybe not in the grand finals or in the semifinals, but as we do MDIs, that is a thing that can happen. In this particular scenario, I think it's going to be one of the things where maybe no one even wipes, but we just might see Raider.io just be that little bit faster. That might actually be the way that they are going to guarantee their win, and excited to see that happen because that's one of the things that's really fun about this tournament.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens in this series. I think there's a lot of open questions. Let's go ahead and take a look at the composition. So Raider.io, this is, if memory serves, this is the sort of comp they were running all throughout, and it doesn't really surprise me. Friends with Affix is not busting out anything too crazy here. Do you guys see anything in specific that stands out?
4 combo rests from Friends with Affixes. I like that.
Yeah, that's definitely not a bad thing to be having in your pocket as you do move in. Having slightly less of those battle res is only going to have 2 on the side of Raider.io, but having some of the strongest classes in the game.
All right, well, as we go into game number 1, what I want to see from Friends with Affix is, at least in this first game, no silly deaths. This was something they struggled with even in the finals against Premonition when they were able to take a game. They had some careless deaths that were based on not respecting mechanics, not getting those interrupts. So if Friends with Affixes wants to make this competitive with, frankly, the best team in this tournament, they have to start right now. Gentlemen, Vault of the Wardens, take it away.
There's a lot that Friends with Affix is playing for as well. Already we are seeing that the only region with 2 teams qualifying at this point is APAC. So they're kind of leading with sending the most teams so far. If Friends with Affixes can pull a major upset here, we'll have 2 NA teams, but most likely Raider.io I think is clearly the favorite team. What do you think of this pool coming out of them?
We're actually seeing a bigger pull from Friends with Affixes here because they're pulling the mini balls and the pack up ahead as well. So have a little bit more of a pack here. It is kind of dangerous with Sanguine as well because they got to make sure that they keep moving. As you can see, one of those mobs, or the actual mini boss, actually struggling around there a little bit, casting. The Moonkin going super low there. Raider.io just going to come up to that boss, being a little bit behind in terms of where they are right now. But if they can get this next pull just controlled, they should be able to just delete it.
Yeah, we're seeing Friends with Affixes doing this pull pretty cleanly. Raider.io starting to speed up ahead, already getting this first pull here on the stairwell.
Yeah, and Friends with Affix is now killing that mini boss, which Raider.io had a little bit more focus because they didn't pull that extra trash. So now they're dealing with these ads and gonna make sure that they stun and interrupt them. Actually, the Moonkin going for a little bit extra mob percentage here with those ads on the sides, pulling them, just leave them in there. They move easily, so they shouldn't be that bad. That is a lot of trash, though, for Raider.io.
I will say, though, you can already see Raider.io having a clear plan. We are going to see the Rogue dipping very low here. It doesn't look, and just going to just fall down at this point.
But Friends with Affix are having 3 deaths already, if not 4 in total as well. They're actually doing a really sloppy pull here. I think they might have a full raid wipe there as well. Yeah, indeed, they do.
Yeah, I don't mind this pool coming out of Raider.io either. You can definitely sacrifice those 5 seconds of time from the death. The Rogue already back into the action, and that's a tricky pool to do with Sanguine as well. You got to really be rotating the mobs around, but so much trash already done. They're already about at that 50% mark. They're going to be able to just stealth past this pack, and this is a pack that can be somewhat tricky. We've already talked about it before. When those metamorphoses start to go off from those fel-infused mobs, if you don't get a kick going, it can just be an absolute team wipe. But coming up here, they're just going to throw out another group of CC because they already have that 49% because the boom can rotate it around, pulled additional trash. They're going to be able to start things off on Tarathon.
I really love seeing this from Raider.io. This is the first time we actually see someone skip those trash that effectively too. Just ignore them. Just let's get to the boss. They're already at 50%. Fringe Affixes is quite a bit behind, and they are dealing with those trash too. However, relatively swiftly as it is not fortified. So Raider.io now 75%. The boss has just gone into Vengeance form now, taking a little bit more damage, throwing out his glaives. So they should have a relatively easy time dealing with this boss here. However, remember, it is 17, it is tyrannical. This boss gets dicey really, really fast.
Yeah, and one of the things they definitely want to be paying attention to, want to make sure that they put up their active mitigation, otherwise the boss will actually, at certain moments, be able to get a shield on himself, and that'll just make it that much longer to actually take him down. We do see Dark Strikes going out right now. Friends with Affixes, though, in the bottom portion of your screen, did manage to pull the boss now after their wipe. They do have 7 deaths at the current moment. You can see their tank getting absolutely spiked down. Cannot get above that 50% mark and is going to fall down. Battle Res comes out very quickly. They have plenty of them at their disposal, and they are 80%. They have 80% already on the boss.
Yeah, that's pretty surprising as well, especially with the Druid ending up dying on that boss. We saw Raider actually have that shield up because the tank didn't have active mitigation up. It doesn't do that much every time it hits. If you don't have active mitigation up, it puts a little bit of shield on the boss, so even if you let one through, it's a little bit of damage loss on the boss because you're obviously dealing with that shield. But now he's going into Havoc form. This is where he's gonna start hurting. This is the real DPS race of the fight. You're gonna have to deal with the fire explosion as you see all the time, as well as that's the hatred coming out right now. The Moonkin going for it and just running away. Everyone needs to deal with that because that is gonna almost one-shot. Actually, the tank standing in it. I'm not sure if that's because he used Blood Mirror, I believe, which actually relays that damage back to the boss a little bit. Sometimes you see the DK standing and stuff, just to do a little bit more damage on the boss. And then that's a Furious Blast. Needs to interrupt that one, try to do it as late as possible, just so the boss just basically stands around there and doesn't do anything. And
taking a look at the Boomkin talents right now, as Raider.io is managing to get down this first boss here, you can see that the Boomkin talented for a very strong AoE build, but didn't actually talent into Soul of the Farce. And this is something that I actually mentioned a little bit earlier today. When you do switch on that ring, the ring of the Archdruid, the legendary ring, you're going to be able to get Soul of the Farce for free, so you can actually spec into Incarnation. Then you're still going to have that additional AoE damage coming off of Shooting Stars, and like, it just allows you to do big damage on the boss as well. And we could see that last time around, that the single target damage was not lacking from the Boomkin. It's not lacking here either for Friends with Affixes.
I think one of the things Raider.io is really benefiting them is that mass grip. You saw right there, they just pulled all the mobs, all the small imps, gripped them all, and then just destroyed them. Meanwhile, Friends with Affixes is now on the Havoc form of this boss. He's done with his damage his phase where he takes less damage. The boss should die relatively fast now, but Raider.io on that Imp Mother and should have it down right away there, and just to see if they are lucky with the elevator and with the avalanche potion.
Yeah, and exactly what you're looking for here is you want the elevator to be all the way down, then you can avalanche potion down, and that's what they got there, and that just saves them quite a few seconds of time, because you can't actually avalanche potion if the elevator's even halfway up. You kind of have to wait for it to come all the way up and then go back down. So that's going to give Raider.io that little bit of an extra push, as they do get to pull Inquisitor right now, and it looks like they're going to be pulling some of the dogs as well, and this is standard for them. You do see quite a lot. Their Moonkin actually trying to pull additional trash, having really strong cleave, also having that Warrior who can get some serious work done as well. I'm sure if we would actually see, most likely the Warrior maybe even spec'd into something like Sweeping Strikes to get some of that additional cleave damage. Now, with the Inquisitor of Torment, there's a lot of stuff to be keeping an eye on, literally and besides the actual eyes.
Well, there's the ad you need to keep an eye on. However, right now we're going to see him teleport over to one of the doors and open them. Actually, it looked like the whole team was getting disoriented there. That was, I don't really know. That's not really the Raider IO we've seen before. I'm not quite sure why that happened, but the whole team was actually disoriented.
Well, more interesting than that to me is for a second it looked like they were maybe thinking about actually going for the pool where you just leave the Inquisitor there, you actually line of sight him so he'll come back with the adds, but having that Death Knight, you're able to do exactly what we just saw. That's the Gore Fiend's grip coming out once those adds are out, pulling them all in, getting massive AoE damage out onto everything. There's the eye again. Doesn't look like we're going to see too much problem with this mechanic. Basically, you just need to look at the eye when it puts that ability out, or you will get disoriented. One of the things with the adds when you actually do pull them in on this particular key, with the Quaking, the group is very stacked up. You don't want to be taking that additional damage. We are going to see Raider IO attempt to spread out. Now, Friends with Affixes finally beat that elevator boss. Now they're going to be pulling Inquisitor again. And this is the thing. Friends with Affixes, they're going to lose another player here. They're up to, they have 9 deaths at this point. And we were saying that even if they're going relatively quickly, but that's just putting more and more of a distance between them and Raider.io. And Raider.io looking very clean, even with those little things like seeing the Moon can actually pull additional adds. Look how far they are on trash.
That's also where you really have that benefit from that DK, as you said. You see those grips, as soon as the ads spawn, everything is on top of each other. The Rogue is able to just go absolute ham on those ads, just destroying them. Friends with Affix haven't won that one death, and as you said, they've had several deaths before, so they clearly do not have a combat res available for them right now.
Yep. Yeah, and one of the other things about the Rogue too is you do mention the Rogue damage being great, and when those ads come out, not only is the Rogue able to do some AoE damage, one of the really nice things like Death from Above going to be huge against all those ads, but actually using that Shuriken Storm once again to create additional combo points, to put more eviscerates into the boss, going to result in a huge increase on single target DPS as well. One of the mechanics that we haven't mentioned so far is this one, Sap Soul, which is coming out, so that's actually going to steal the next ability that you put out, and it's pretty easy to play around though, using an ability that's less important, you're not going to need in a very pivotal moment.
Yeah, we can see also all those ads that Raider.io has pulled extra with the boss, he's cleaving them down kinda. Like, I'm pretty sure that Raider.io has practiced this a ton and knows exactly how many mobs they want to have to deal with before they end up skipping some trash. And we've seen that especially in the last corridor. It's a little bit of a slow corridor, so right now we're seeing them killing the second boss. Inquisitor is down for Raider.io now, and they're gonna deal with that Shivara.
Yeah, looking at the Warrior now, this was kind of one of the things I wanted to see. We are going to see that sweeping strike, so that's going to give additional cleave. Also, Avatar and Ravager. Now, this is kind of the wombo combo for Warriors when you actually do get into these Mythic Pluses, because you can just pop that Avatar, you can pop that Ravager all at once, and that is basically just going to do so much damage, especially if you stack it with things like the Glaives. It's just so much damage all at once, and it's very quick. They come off of cooldown non-stop, so you basically just look at trash packs and say, hey, do we want to delete this one? Okay, I'm going to take a breather, and then I will delete the next one. Now, Raider.io getting that Shivara down, expecting them to go straight to Glazer here. This is the more standard strategy. We did see Premonition kind of taking a Yui, going over to take down the good old Ash Golem first, but man, Friends with Affix is not having a DPS up this entire fight, and being one man down, just going to make it take that much longer.
Yeah, that fight will take so much time. They've only just finished with one of the doors as well, so they're gonna have to deal with another door and another 40% on a Tyrannical 17 boss. That is a lot of HP, and they do not have a DK, so they can't solo this one.
Yeah, now on to Glazer. This boss we've already seen a few times today. Major mechanics that you want to be watching out for is everything that is shooting around on the ground. He then goes into this phase where he puts a shield up on himself. One of the mirrors, the overloaded lens that you see on your screen, you need to be able to DPS that. Once you finish taking it down, it'll pop up and you're actually able to redirect it. The eye beam comes out, you shoot it back at the boss, and then you're back to DPSing.
Yeah, you gotta point these mirrors back at him, and right now he's gonna take a bit of more damage for a while, for like 10 or 15 seconds, I believe. And this is where you really see cooldowns coming out. We see the Holy Paladin just using wings and probably just destroying this boss quite a bit too, because it's very important to try to be able to push it so fast that you do not get a second lens phase, as that will make you spend so much time on this boss, and that's something we've seen several teams do before, so I have no doubt to see Raider IO do exactly that as long as they don't have any death.
Yeah, Meow Chan's damage being really impressive here. And one of the other things to note about Meow Chan being in that melee range there, he's going to actually spawn some of those blue orbs that you see running across the ground, going to put them in the direction of Glazer, so he'll take additional damage there as well. I just got to take a moment here to just commend Raider.io. I mean, they're playing it by the book. You see them doing those cheeky little extra pulls. I mean, it's not bolstering, so they don't have to really worry about that. It's free combo points, and it's free Moon King cleave. And we already saw that the Moon King is wearing Lady and the Child as well, so the Moonfire is going to be cleaving as well. It's just free damage at that point. Now they have 81%. I'm just curious to see how they take the rest of the dungeon when they actually do get to that spooky room. Obviously, they have to get Ash Golem out of the way first, but once they get down there, seeing which pulls they skip is going to be a big factor. Now, Friends with Affixes not playing, I mean, they haven't looked that bad, right? They have the 9 deaths on the board, which is definitely concerning, but they've kind of regained. But having their no warrior during that boss fight just added so much time to their clock. They're going to pull the Shavara right now. I think the big thing is that I want to see with Friends with Affixes when we get to the second game is we've seen them before have performances like this where they kind of have like that one trip and then all of a sudden they're a great team. I want to see them just not have that trip and see what they really can do when they are racing against Raider.io, who is now working on Ash Golem, who is currently brittle.
Yeah, losing that warrior really make them take so much longer time to deal with a second boss. So Raider IO now on Ash Golem, getting a 60% after the first brittle phase where he takes more damage, and then now having to actually do the phase a little bit, soaking those fires, as you can see the AMS coming out there as well. So you're gonna see probably the row going over some as well with Cloak of Shadows. Right there we see them just to soak them up. It's actually really close there because you want to make sure that you soak them up so that they do not creep into those fire rats, as a little bit hard time seeing here, but they are close to the boss. Also moving the boss on top of it so that they can do really effective cleave, as we've seen several times from Raider IO's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things we can actually see, and yeah, we are seeing it right now, is the Death Knight can just go ahead and pop things like AMS and just run right through the fire and deal with that mechanic very easily. So we are going to see their Death Knight being the one to lead the charge on dealing with that mechanic. More fire puddles coming down right now, but it shouldn't be a problem. Plenty of real estate is left, but actually the Paladin going to take care of it here. Second brittle phase now coming out, and the damage is going to be absolutely bonkers as the boss does take additional damage during this portion of the fight. Friends with Affixes, though, they're going to be working on Ash Golem slightly behind. They will have to hang a Yui, though, and go back to Glazer. This is going to be their third boss. So they are going for the route that we saw Premonition. Maybe this is kind of the NA route that is being taken over and over again, because this happened twice in the region, but they are at a much slower place than their NA brothers were.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, it's probably more due to cooldown management. As we saw in that series too, the warrior was dead for quite a while on the boss before, so now they're going into this one and just, I guess, kind of having all cooldowns ready in both these cases, so that's why they opt to go for Ash Golem instead. So Raider IO now killed Ash Golem, Friends of Affixes on him, and yet another boss. So Raider IO probably gonna skip here with the Shroud, probably with a movement speed potion as well, or it looks like they actually just straight up Invis potioned everyone there, yeah.
It's interesting to see the Invis potion there. So one of the big things, and mentioned this a little bit earlier in the day, when you do have the Quaking, it can make the stealth pulls very tricky. So they're going to use this Invis potion all the way. Now the Quaking's going to come at a pretty decent time. They should be able to just plummet on down with these Meteor potions, and that's the second elevator that did really go in their favor.
Friends of Affix is having that Hunter dying there and ending up having to combat res him. They have plenty of combat reses, however, they also have plenty of deaths, so they have a lot of, are using them constantly. Raider IO, however, as you said, the Invis potion there, which is a little bit different from what we've seen before. We've seen other teams Invis potion right here after these spiders instead, so you can't actually Shroud at that point, because if you Shroud one of them, you might not make it through both of the mini bosses there. So
also the thing with Raider.io is they pull with that in mind as well, so they still do need to get an 8% here on the board if they want to get into Cordana, and they do have the Shroud of Concealment here, so they will be able to skip a decent amount of trash here. Just have to make sure Quaking does go in their favor, but they will only need to do an additional pull alongside, and now they are going to pull those spiders, so it looks like they're going to be doing these spiders next to to the mob that is somewhat of the gatekeeper here, that Broodmaster, and then there's one more mob that's actually going to be, I think that Broodmaster is the last one.
Yeah, you have the Brood Mother, and then after that you have one of those Vanquish Spirits. It's kind of risky, as you mentioned earlier in a previous series, to kill Spiderlings and the Vengeance, Spirit of Vengeance, because that Spirit of Vengeance does not move.
But it's
getting these Sanguine
it's the spirit. Yeah, it's the Spirit of Vengeance though that actually does open the door,
Yep.
right? So we have seen some groups kind of been at the point where they only need the Spirit of Vengeance, but they pull additional pulls. Raider.io maybe pulling one extra mob here. I was a little surprised that they pulled all the spiders. The Broodmother does give a decent amount of percentage up on the board. Raider.io definitely in the driver's seat here. Friends with Affix is now working on Glazer, getting some decent damage onto him. They need to get down that lens right now if they want to catch up. But I think the main thing is here, they need a big wipe. That's the only way that they potentially catch up to Raider.io. And I don't necessarily think that when we jumped into the series, was saying that a big thing that could happen is, they make sure to get down that Vengeful Spirit first too, so they can actually have someone charge on up, get the RP started. So finding those little inches is going to put a lot of seconds in Raider.io's favor. But the big thing to look out for was, I really think Friends with Affixes, we've seen performances in the past where they could be very close to Raider.io in this particular dungeon, and if Friends with the Affixes can slightly regain when they get in this next series, maybe they can actually take a map, especially with their pick. Maybe they can take one off of Raider.io, but going into Cordana here, Raider.io probably not breaking a sweat.
Yeah, we've seen them basically do flawless pulls, flawless dungeons, and bosses in the past, so seeing something that would cost a detrimental wipe for them is going to be unlikely. However, it can happen. It is tyrannical. So right now they're dealing with this ad that stole the light from them. They do not have that hunter, so they can't look up, find Cordana easier. So they have to actually get that light back, look, and then find the boss. And now they just gotta get her down to 40%. Meanwhile, Friends with Affix is now gonna be dealing with this jailer here. They're having the hunter actually move past and deters. I'm probably gonna feign death eventually and just have that kind of sacrifice tactic without actually sacrificing. But didn't work out well for them at all. They do end up losing the Moonkin.
Yeah, pulled aggro. I mean, one of the main things you want to do there is you're basically the decoy as your team runs by, and also the Meteor Potion going to slam them straight into the elevator, which they will now need to ride down. It looks like one member did get through, so that is really unfortunate as far as seconds are going to be for Friends with Affixes. But jumping back on board with Raider.io, I think the main thing to note is all of the things that we can sit here and say as casters we would like to see improve are so nitpicky and unrealistic. Like, I really think that Raider.io did perform this really well. I mean, there are obviously things that you can say, but not being in the dungeon, it's a lot easier to say those things than actually enact them. So you got to give it up to Raider.io, exactly what we do expect from them. This is the leading team in the world right now. It seems to be the favorite to win this, but Friends with Affixes definitely do have a shot coming into the second map, but they are not looking good here. All of a sudden, they're going to lose another two.
Yeah, I believe that was intentional because they were trying to skip effectively. And the Raider, as we can see right now, are dealing with this wall phase. I'm not sure if they actually got that last not creeping doom, the purple stuff. They did not actually clear it off completely. But right now, they just gotta wait this creeping doom out, not stand in these walls, and then they gotta prepare to kill that ad that's gonna come up and make the boss immune for, well, while he's casting. So we're gonna see, we're instantly just gonna see Meow-chan just interrupt or stun that one right away, and then just not caring about that ad, because as it always spawns in this quarter. There we go, Avatar of Vengeance, instant Hammer of Justice, boss is not immune anymore, and now they just gotta make sure that they don't stand in that glaive that's coming back, because that when it does, you take twice the damage.
Yeah, but once again, everything ends up working out for them. You know, Meow-chan has to somewhat sacrifice a little bit of damage to actually move over to that puddle to get rid of it, holding the light, runs over, but then you want to be tanking it in that corner anyway. Meow-chan can instantly snap back onto the target. We're seeing a lot of damage coming out with Meow-chan staying in tow with the tank here, but just an impressive run all around for Raider.io. They deserved some Titan Forge loot coming out of this one.
Both teams kind of living up to their identities here as we've come to know them over the course of the Mythic Dungeon Invitational. Raider.io came in. It wasn't a flawless run, but it was close enough for all intents and purposes. They still look just as powerful as they were looking when we saw them last weekend. And Friends with Affixes as well. You know, I talked about one of the things that really defines this team is they got better or as the day went on last week. And maybe that's just a thing. Maybe it's nerves. Maybe they start out just a little bit janky. The problem here is they don't have that window of time to get comfortable and get adjusted. This was, what was it, 7 or 8 deaths right out of the gate for them. And then, they started to get a little bit better. The problem here becomes, even if they're better, is nowhere near Raider.io.
I like what you said about playing to their identity. Raider.io always does a fantastic job. Never necessarily flashy. Like, you don't see those crazy strategies that came out of teams like, honestly, a little bit earlier in the tournament, but just consistently flawless for the most part. But when you actually do look at Friends with Affixes, the way that they perform, it's not necessarily even improvement within the match itself. But definitely seen improvement out of this team throughout the past weekends. But the thing with them is they make these hiccups that just curse the rest of their run. And the rest of their run, if you took out those couple of seconds, if you took out that initial wipe with 7 deaths, all of a sudden the run looks pretty much perfect. So they just need to find a way to not have that one hiccup, and all of a sudden they're valid.
Yeah, they had a little bit of issue, as we saw there. They actually did a bigger pool than Raider.io at the very start. However, did not end up in their favor and ended up wiping and having to deal with a lot of that trash again. And really lost so much time having that warrior dead the whole fight on Inquisitor as well. It costed them, like, as we can see here, almost like 2 minutes.
Yeah, and we have talked about over the course of this Invitational that one of the things that separates the teams that lose from the teams that win is the willingness to take risks, right? The willingness to just have these gambles of pulls. Friends with Affix is, again, another part of what makes this team as their identities is risky pulls. It's willingness to take gambles, and we praise gambles when they pay off, and unfortunately, in a situation like that, we kind of condemn it. But there's more at work than just those 2 facets. We've talked time and time again, Vault of the Wardens, the opening trash, they have the transformations. It's so important to respect how that trash specifically works versus other trash. And that was, I just felt there was a little bit of disrespect towards how powerful those packs can be in the second half of their lifespan.
Well, I agree, though, as well. It's easy to have recency bias, but when this team is actually Friends with Affixes is sitting against Raider.io, you know that it's something that they had to be thinking about. That's not how you want to enter the tournament. That you're just playing against the team that is the #1 seed in Europe, the entire world, and you know their splits. So you look at your pulls and say, how do we shave seconds off? How do we make these times that haven't historically beaten them in the past, because that's most likely the scenario that they are in, and say, how do we make it a little bit faster? A lot of the time it's going to be with big pulls.
No.
We'll see where Friends with Affixes chooses to go on their map. This is going to be their choice, and we've seen a pretty diverse approach to this. We've actually seen Court of Stars, Darkheart Thicket, and Eltharian's Lair, and we're going to see Court of Stars again. So this, as I think about this, does not surprise me at all from them. I would not expect to see them go Nelts. I would not expect them to go Darkheart Thicket, because I think they realize that in a standard map where it's just a race in very simple mechanically oriented maps, they are not favored. Raider.io has the favor there, so they're saying as much curveball as we can get to, which was either going to be Court of Stars or Upper Karazhan, that's where we're going. That's how we're going to approach this. It's the only shot we have against Raider.io.
I'm not going to lie. it would have been so cool to see Raider.io on Upper Karazhan. I just want to see what a group like that, how they would actually handle a lot of those mechanics. But I think this is a heads-up pick coming in from the NA team.
Yeah, if Raider.io would have chosen the map, they could have maybe chosen Upper Karazhan and tried to, like, throw
if Raider.io had picked that, I guarantee it would have just been Nelts, and they're like, well, see you in 12 minutes, we're going to win.
Yeah.
Right?
True. Yeah, that is another very valid thing to think about. But coming in with the Court of Stars pick, I mean, it's going to be, we've already seen it, and we've already seen a lot of team splits and been talking about that a lot, but you kind of have to just be looking and saying, this is exactly how much time that we actually do have to clear it. But the other cool thing about Court of Stars is actually seeing the variance that comes out in that initial trash pool. We've seen quite a lot. I know, Trekkie, there's one strategy that you really like to see early when they do finally get up the stairs and get that first pool going. Maybe we'll see that coming in. Maybe we'll see that old backdoor strat as well. So I'm just excited to see what these teams do.
And I think that's an important point, is you touching on with Court of Stars, the variance, the different ways you can go about it to where it's not just a mechanical linear path down a hallway, which is what Nelts is, right? Nelts is just hallway simulator. You get to the end and you just, collect your loot. Whereas Court of Stars, there's decisions to be made. There's room for enterprising teams that are willing to take gambles and kind of go against the grain. So I think we were always going to come here. I think this is just always the way it was going to be. Upper Karazhan certainly represents another curveball, but I think it's one where they still felt Raider.io probably has the edge in. And you don't play this game thinking, well, even if we get the win, we have to go to Raider.io's map. It becomes one game at a time. That's how you have to approach it, and that's no doubt how they're taking it.
I think approaching it one game at a time is really important, right? Just figuring out. I mean, you can't win the third game if you don't win the second one. So I mean, yeah. I mean, but it really is one of those scenarios. You can't necessarily avoid a map because you want it to stay in the map pool for that third series. Like, it sounds very over the top logical, like it doesn't need to be stated, but there are so many scenarios where when you actually do have that pick, you overthink it and you just end up throwing.
No, it's absolutely an issue, but we have the comps ready. I'm really not expecting much at all in the way of changes, but Brewmaster Monk.
Yeah, we saw that his friends with Affixes, I believe they qualified and have played with Brewmaster earlier in the series as well. So I'm not too surprised. I don't think it brings that much, but if we don't have Sanguine, so we don't need that DK necessarily. So Brewmaster is just something that they like playing, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is comfort is definitely important. We've seen comfort be king in quite a few scenarios, but going into this one, there are some specific moments in the dungeon that I'm thinking of that might be a little scary to have the Brewmaster Monk. Besides that, very standard compositions coming out of the DPS, and I really love both teams' picks there.
Well, this is it. Friends with Affixes has to make a stand now, or else Radar.io is going to stop, drop, and then you know how it goes. Open up shop on them and close out the series. Gentlemen, take your boat ride.
I did not expect that intro for like a relaxing boat ride. Just like stop, drop. Okay, let's do it. Let's hop on the boats, Trekkie.
Well, we had this in exactly the same map in the previous series that we casted earlier, and just like then we have Tyrannical on Court of Stars. So teaming will make Trash more dangerous to deal with, but the previous team we saw there doing that just did big pulls anyway and just didn't really care that much. So interesting to see what we're going to see from these two teams, how they end up pulling. We even saw the Cats being pulled at the very start from Honestly.
Yeah, and one other thing, just want to say, usually we do see this first one skipped, expecting to see that again. Not a very efficient pull. We've said it throughout all of the weeks, but the questions that I do have for you, what moments in this dungeon do you think are going to be the most scary for that Brewmaster Monk? Actually going to see him popping up on your screen right now. Obviously, it is sometimes good to play comfortably, and maybe that was one of the reasons they felt like they had some of those hiccups in the last dungeon. So they will have that advantage, which is an important one, but do you think that there's anything that's particularly terrifying for the Brewmaster and Cap coming out here?
No, I believe it's more than fine. Running basically whatever, you gotta play to your strengths a little bit there, and the Brewmaster is just I guess pretty good all around. If they don't need that combat rest, they already have two. So and actually they have three because the Hunter is actually BM. So Radar.io only having two, but they doesn't really seem to slow them down much at all.
Well, you can also tell that they have experience doing it on the Brewmaster. They actually throw out that Paralyze very early there so they can close space and then pull the mobs. And one of the things with that is you see that initial spike damage come out sometimes, and it's able to just chunk a tank. So by closing that space, just making sure they pull it, they don't have any sloppy deaths. And Trekkie, I know you love which direction they went here.
Yeah, they went left, they went downstairs, and I really like this. There's a few mobs to deal with here. There's especially a caster. You just need to make sure that he's interrupted and a few guards. Otherwise, it's very efficient percentage to get down, and then you just get up. Radar.io being a little bit going up now after having killed that and just doing a relatively big pull. The affixes are teaming Volcanic and Tyrannical, so there's no reason not to pull big here outside of having people dying. Radar.io actually have their Moonkin go super low, but that is a lot of Volcanics we see in the corner.
Yeah, I mean, the Moonkin's going to be dealing with most of the Volcanics at this point. Definitely with AoE pulls as well. And I already saw what was running the Lady and the Child in previous dungeons. Expecting to see that as well here for those bigger pulls at the beginning of this dungeon. Probably switching off of it a little bit later. That's going to allow just a serious amount of damage to be mobile as well. Getting that extra 20% off of your Moonfire. So that deals with Volcanic very nicely here. And we are seeing just neck and neck at this point. Friends with Affixes and Radar.io both choosing to go left, going down, coming back up after getting that efficient trash. So the boss is going to be one of those defining moments, seeing who can do more single target damage into a Tyrannical boss, which you already have mentioned, Trekkie.
Well, Vim just going super low there, getting that cat jumping on him. It's not that dangerous because it's not raging or anything like that, but it still deals a ton of damage, and that is just really, really dangerous. If the affix, it would have been slightly different too. Even then, he ends up going down. So Radar.io actually pulling the boss right now. They're so quite a bit ahead. I didn't actually see how they dealt with the trash beforehand. They might actually have skipped it, I would believe, because that's a lot of trash that you don't really necessarily want to deal
So
with.
I would explain.
As you see, you see it there in the corner.
I would explain it to you, but I don't have $1, so I can't make the pun I want to make. So maybe if you lend me $1, I will be able to explain it. But we see Raider.io and Friends with Affixes. Wow, Friends with Affix is going to lose another one. They had so many battle reses at their disposal.
They ended up doing exactly the same. They sacrificed.
Yeah, they did sacrifice.
Had him run off, sacrifice, just because that trash is not worth dealing with. It's teaming. It has those extra arcane elementals. You don't really want to deal with those to do the frontal effect. So they just ended up sacrificing. I assume that Raider.io would have used a Shroud for that, or just Invis Potion, as we have seen them do that in the past. So right now, instead, they're on the Patrol Captain, Gerdo, and having to deal with him, they have the Holy Paladin for when he puts out the debuff that makes it have to jump or move to get it off. You can just instantly dispel one, and you can freedom one, and then you can shapeshift out of one, and then even you have that Rogue being able to Cloak of Shadows it too. Right there we see it right off the bat. The Moon can getting that freedom, so he doesn't need to move at all. You can just stay out and DPSing.
Yeah, he's still wearing Lady and the Child as well. One thing that I did just notice when we actually did see those Moonfires come down, but they only have about 3% left on this boss. We've mentioned a few times before, we actually don't have any items in here except for the Vial, so we are going to see the Patrol Captain just go ahead and poison himself here. It makes it really nice for Raider.io. They're going to be able to move forward. And now the question is, which path do they actually decide to take here?
They are splitting up, actually. The Miao-chan going forward, just trying to... I'm not sure if he's trying to see where the Enforcer might have spawned. Meanwhile, the others seem to go at the very start instead. So they are definitely splitting up here for a reason. And Miao-chan just going in and dying, I guess. I'm not quite sure why, but I'm sure we will get back to that. Oh, he just goes back in to die to get rest, to run back in to the others.
That is really interesting because the others made it there just as fast. So what do you think that Miao-chan actually gets out of that?
Well, they might have done it because the others might have been able to have their combat invisibility potion available, and obviously some could stealth through that pack that they didn't end up skipping. I believe they have Miao-chan die once again here, right, as he released, got back to that pole, and just ended up dying from incidental AoE, and just able to release back up again. And
so it's a really interesting strategy, and the thing with it as well is it just shows a huge amount of planning. Friends with the Affixes just get the Patrol Captain down now, while we see an Enforcer being worked on by Raider.io. Really good positioning, going to be inside of this building here. That can allow for a lot of stuff to go down as far as line of sight is concerned. There are just multiple ways to break LOS. Some serious damage is going to be coming out onto the DK tank, but he should be nice and fine here. Pretty sizable pull, but because it is on Tyrannical, this isn't necessarily going to be a scary moment for them. Usually when you get up to this part of the dungeon is when it starts to get scary. If it's on Fortified, this is the trash to be looking out for, but when it is on Tyrannical, it's going to be that second boss where the heat is really kicked up.
Yeah, I'm super excited actually seeing in this series, we see both teams go back. I think Miao-chan might have actually pulled that trash pack and then run away from it so that the others could have walked past. Would have made a lot of sense to me, at least, so that is quite possible. Friends with Affixes, however, also doing that strat, which is really interesting because neither of the teams in the previous series in Court of Stars did that, and here we see both teams doing it, and it just kind of goes to show that both those teams kind of knew what they were doing, might have been practice, might have been doing their homework, trying to get ready for this, and knew exactly what they want to do in Court of Stars.
Yeah, I want to talk about Friends with Affixes as well, because it's clear that they're going with the same exact strategy as Raider.io. You know that they probably weren't talking to each other. Yeah, I'm curious if Friends with Affixes, maybe if they were talking to maybe Premonition, you know, the other team in the NA, they know that with how the bracket shook up, that they wouldn't necessarily be playing against each other. Saw a little sign of that when they were actually in the previous dungeon, when they were in Vault, because they did that similar thing, going to Ash Golem instead of going over to the Eye first. But now here we actually see Raider.io doing something very different. I'm curious if maybe Premonition would have been doing the same thing as well, but it seems to be one of the fastest strategies. Friends with Affixes starting to close that gap that Raider.io got up at the beginning of the series. The main thing is just all going to come down to the bosses here, Trekkie, and they are going to be tough.
Yeah, and what we actually saw here from Raider.io was really interesting because we've seen when we've seen teams wipe in this instance, it's almost always been the Enforcers not being able to line of sight them properly. And Raider.io taking care of that Enforcer in that house a bit while ago, and then after that, dealing with that mini-boss doesn't really do much and pulling a ton of trash at the same time.
Yeah, I think
dealing
one
with
of the
it.
big things with these enforcers too, as well, is we saw a lot of Court of Stars on like fortified in the earlier stages of the dungeon. Like a lot of it was on fortified, so those enforcers were just that much scarier. And we talked about how the bosses are really scary here on Tyrannical, but they didn't have to deal with that. That's not the case today. But once again, perfect pull on the enforcer because it is nearly impossible to get any disruption going. So you really do need that line of sight to be saving yourself from that fell detonation. And you can see them playing it textbook here. Raider.io getting very close to getting that second boss. Friends with Affix is going for a very massive pull.
They're doing the exact same pull, which is I find is would be really interesting. They pull exactly the same one. They have the first attempt. The healer going super low though, but they are doing the same strat there. They need to make sure that they deal with the construct here because he does a cast that ends up that puts a heal on or hot on him that heals everything around him, not himself, however. But you just need to CC that one, knock it down. We saw a knock before. Or just interrupt stuns just to deal with that, and it's still alive, but they are dealing with this ad from the boss as well that is called Amakucha, if you didn't see that before.
Oh, beautiful pronunciation of that name. I would not have been brave enough to try that one, Trekkie. So one of the big things, like as you mentioned before you said that complete crossword puzzle of a name, Raider.io and Friends with Affix is pretty much mirroring each other. Of course, Raider.io is a little bit ahead here, but the strategy is just exactly the same. I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of those strategies. One of the cool things about the Mythic Dungeon Invitational, everyone watching at home kind of taking notes, trying to figure out what they're going to do when they get into dungeons. This kind of seems to be the new standard pull, and it isn't the one that we saw the other groups doing. So hats off to Friends with Affixes. Now jumping back on with Raider.io as they are going to try to get down here. I'm going to take a step in your shoes. Balgar the Watcher as they try to bring him down. You do see their warrior getting very low, but they're able to do it without a problem.
Yeah, but Friends with Affix is trying to catch up a little bit of time here, taking that first lieutenant together with the next enforcers. It's going to give them 5% trash percentage too. So they're just going to make sure that they get those down. At the same time, the second lieutenant going to come running. And meanwhile, Raider.io is now dealing with the third enforcer, third and final enforcer for them. Going to have the ad come out, and they are perfect on percentage. Both teams are actually exactly the same, except for the fact that Friends with Affix is just one mini-boss behind.
Yeah, which is a decent amount of time, but that's why I'm kind of just highlighting that. Really, Flame Wreath and Melandris, these are bosses that wipes can happen on. And you can almost forgive a group for a wipe happening on Tyrannical on these bosses. The way that both of them work is they're going to ramp up in damage throughout the fight. And if you get yourself in a position where there's that one little hiccup and you have to invest a cooldown, and then you don't have it when the damage just stacks up to the point that it's very unforgivable, you can easily have that full team wipe. Now Raider.io going to be getting down this last lieutenant and moving over to the boss.
I really like what Friends with Affix is doing. How they're all standing close to that wall so that they can actually end up line of sighting the disintegration beam if they need to. However, every single one of them went on the tank, which means that he deals less damage. However, nobody else takes that damage, so it's very safe that way. And now they're going up to the last enforcer. Meanwhile, Raider.io just finished that last minute boss off. Gonna come up, gonna pull Flame Wrath in just a few seconds here.
Yeah, and the thing is even if you don't need to use it, right? It all did go their way and go onto their tank. Being prepared, always going to be the best policy. And we haven't seen this very often. They're actually going to get right up against the fountain. I like this. It does make it very easy to deal with these imps that are going to be coming out. They want to make sure to invest all of their Blood Elf silences into these imps and just be very disruptive on them in general as they are going to plummet down. Having that Boomkin, having that warrior, we're going to see massive amounts of damage coming out here to get rid of those imps. That first pack, very easy to deal with, but they're going to get more and more difficult to deal with because Flame Wraith is just going to be dealing more damage. So every second they're up, going to be less and less forgiving.
Yeah, we already see a ton of damage on top of the raid here, but it's going to go up even more. And there we go, the second wave of Flame Wraiths as well. They're doing a very good job at making sure that everyone is stacked up so that the ads spawn. They spawn under players a few seconds delayed after the ability comes out from Flame Wraith. And right now we're gonna see the burning intensity. There we go. Now it's stacked up another stack, which means that it does more damage on the full group. So every time she does that cast, it's gonna be more and more damaged. And now the imp spawn is coming out as well. Not as perfectly stacked up there, But they should just be able to make quick work of them. Just make sure that they do not get those casts off. There we go, a shockwave stun from the warrior as well. Just making sure that they do not get anything off, as the damage right now is very devastating.
That's one of the nice things about pulling right on top of the fountain at the beginning. If you get in a situation where shockwave's on cooldown, your solar beam's on cooldown, just all and like no one has a belt silence, you can basically just kind of line of sight and actually just use more of the area that you do have that is clean to avoid that damage. Now with only 8% left, and we do see the Moonkin getting very low here, maybe choosing to pop a renewal or something like that, but will manage to get healed back up. And now Raider.io, just if they can solve this mystery nice and quick, they should be able to pull ahead, because Friends with Affix is just getting their pull going onto the boss. And if Raider.io does this, they are going to be able to close this one out. They also do have a Paladin, which is going to make it just a little bit easier. That pesky Paladin, man.
It's actually only protection paladins that can find the Dreadlord easier. Holy Paladin is not going to be having any luck there. None of the teams actually having anyone that can do it, more than having to actually open your eyes and look.
Wow, I didn't even know that was only Prod. I didn't realize that was only Prod. So yeah, one of the other ones, of course, is going to be Spectral Sight that we can see as well. So that pops up on all specs of Demon Hunters. But it looks like Raider.io able to close this one out very quickly, figuring out who it is, and they're running on over.
We actually see the warrior now putting on his gotta go fast boots and Zephyr's Secret just to try to get faster between pulls. I would be very surprised if this is what he actually ends up using on any kind of bosses or anything, but here it's just all about movement speed. You just run a little bit faster, might as well, and now they're just waiting for this skull mob to come out.
Gotta go so fast that you use Wraithwalk in place. That is ultimate speed. Now busting out the moves. Raider.io, I'm not gonna lie, they look pretty confident here as they do wait, putting on a show for us as the Dreadlord does pop out of his disguise. We've seen some groups in the past, and maybe we will see it from them too, actually move the Dreadlord out, try to get a little bit closer to the door, but with the amount of time that they have, I think they may just try to delete it right where it stands.
It depends a little bit on what kind of comp you have. As you mentioned, we've seen teams drag it slowly over to where the last boss is. It can buy you a little bit of time, but you can also completely negate that time if you have the healer leave at like 5-10% on the boss, and he will be there in time anyway, and then everyone else has a minute to get there. So meanwhile, Friends with Affix is doing still a good job on this second last boss, Flame Breath, and another 7% to go, 6%, and they just gotta make sure that they finish it off. Everyone going super low though, so they're gonna have some healing cooldowns come out here before they actually get finished off, and there we go. That was getting a little bit too close to the end there, but
that was a lot closer than it was for Raider.io. That's undeniable. It seemed like it might have been one of those scenarios that we actually saw some people fall down. We saw the Dots do some work, but now they're going to start an investigation of their own as Raider.io sits and waits out the RP, actually going to be dropping down a pylon there. Wonder if they're going to be stacking around that pylon.
Yeah. I believe that right now they're just trying to show off. I'm pretty sure they know that they're quite ahead, so now the boss is getting ready to pummel them, and there we go. Raider.io now against Melandris.
And Melandris is similar to Flame Wraith in the damage is going to stack. Which abilities should everyone be keeping an eye on, Trekkie?
We saw actually people dying from that piercing glaive we just saw earlier. The boss spawns a lot of copies on him. Every time he charges, as we saw right there, he spawns a copy that lives for about a minute and a half. And then that one will do the same abilities as he will doing. So now he did the Slicing Maelstrom. It's only 2 copies up, so there's 3 of him doing that ability. Now there's 4 of him gonna do those abilities. That's a flame, that's a Piercing Gale that you need to make sure that you step out. This room gets crowded so fast because of all the abilities he does. Whirlwind, the Piercing Gale, and then you gotta make sure that you do not die from this Maelstrom. As we see, Raider.io taking a ton of damage right here, keeping everyone alive. There's just a few ticks of it, so it gets dangerous, but it's over relatively quickly.
Yeah, big thing to know. Raider.io, if they close this one out, they are going to be qualifying to move to those semifinals, and then they will be Europe's only chance to actually win the entire thing. If Friends with Affixes can keep this alive, it will take most likely a wipe to come out from Raider.io.
Yeah, Raider.io having 2 deaths, only really one being intentional, however, but still managing to stack up quite a lot of a lead here. Now having Melandris at 50%, meanwhile Friends with Affix is still dealing with that Dreadlord. And now we should see another Maelstrom come out from Raider IO. Right there, there we go. That's a lot of damage. Moonkin standing very far out there, but getting topped up. Miaoshan also getting really low there, but it's just a few ticks to make sure that they survive the last one. And I'm unsure if we even have seen personals come out. Probably going to come out later on.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the Warrior dip into D stance there. He's back just swinging away, doing full damage at this point. But I am really happy with how the series did shake out. We actually did see Friends with Affixes not necessarily having a big mistake. And we kind of get to see Raider IO just actually how fast their time really is. Because Friends with Affixes went for pretty much the same strategies, had the same amount of deaths, but still, Raider.io is here right now by themselves on Melandris, just 15% about from closing this one out and being Europe's champion, moving on to the semifinals.
Yeah, they got one last Maelstrom to survive there, and everyone going super low. We saw healer cooldowns definitely go out there just to make sure that everyone survives. We even saw a bop on the Druid Moonkin earlier just to be sure that he doesn't take any damage. That damage is physical, so a bop will completely negate that. And now 2%, 1%, 2% left to go. This is going to be Raider IO's game.
They take the series 2-0 in a commanding performance. But I got to say, I am proud of Friends with Affixes. They are out of the tournament, but that is the game I wanted to see from them. That is the cleanest we have seen them look this tournament. And we saw just, this is a night and day team, but they just have so much potential. And I really hope this team stays together and continues to work on getting better because, you know, in potential future events, they have the potential to be a great team, and
it also highlights how absolutely terrifying Raider.io is.
Yeah.
I mean, they look way scarier now. You see a team play very well, and still they're like a boss ahead. Like, I would not want to have to wake up tomorrow and start off my day by playing against Meowchan's team. Raider.io looks absolutely terrifying, and I gotta give it up for APAC though. That's actually the region I want to give it up for because they're the only region now with 2 squads moving forward.
Yeah, we went into this series and we were saying, well, if Friends with Affixes plays their best, is it anywhere near good enough to contest Raider.io? And I think by the end we learned, like, you know, they played their best. They had a very noble performance. But at the end of the day, Raider.io just continuing to look like this powerhouse team.
Yeah, doing smart pulls, doing very effective pulls. We saw that in the half part where they pull one of those lieutenants, they move it into other trash, deal with them at the same time, and just buys them so much time. That here we see Friends after having a death there from that cat doing so much damage.
To actually echo that when you talk about smart pulls, right? Because we definitely did see smart pulls coming out, but we saw the same strategy basically from both sides, and that's kind of why I'm harping on it a little bit. But the whole thing is there are a few things that are going to make you do really well in these dungeons. It's the strategy, it's the execution, and it's your composition. And the strategy for both of these sides was nearly identical, and you just see Raider.io having better execution. And maybe their composition was a little bit better. I think that they were relatively similar compositions for the most part, and I don't think that the Brewmaster tank was really a problem. I'm happy that they went to it, because the more that I think about it, I feel like they aren't making mistakes when they actually do have the Brewmaster tank. I feel like there was a little bit of discomfort when they tried to switch to the more meta comp, if you will.
Yeah, so when we break this down, you know, first thing I'm doing when I get off the desk personally is probably just going to go home, lock myself in my hotel room, and just play WoW and ignore you all.
Do like a +3? Like
I'm not feeling +6, buddy. I'm up to +6.
Good job.
But, you know, if you're watching and you're thinking, okay, I want to do this. What makes Raider.io just so good? You know, you hit on some of the points. It's execution. It is having a good comp. It is making sure you're not missing interrupts. It's making sure you're not missing the mechanics. Just making sure that the pulls you make, you can actually deal with. And there's no, compare them side by side to Friends with Affixes. Friends with Affixes, over the course of their tournament run, all tournament, basically had packs where they're like, hey, you think we got this? Let's just go for it. Whereas like Raider.io, every single time they took a pull, with the exception of I think once in Cathedral of Eternal Night, they knew every single pack they could pull, and that's what makes them such a good team and what the other teams are going to have to do tomorrow in the semifinals and possibly the finals there to have any shot of beating them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you want to play good, right? That is the first part of
actually. You want to play well, Rich. You want to play well.
Play good, guys. But the other thing is that pathing, I think that we don't see many groups actually choosing that in Court of Stars, dipping down, going left first, then actually going back. I feel like if you're looking to sit, if you're on a 2 chest right now and you're trying to get to a 3 chest, those are the things that can really kind of bump you up in that department.
Yeah, we saw both teams, like I said, go left, and then they skip the trash right before the first boss, which is kind of dangerous because it has those 2 arcane elementals, does a frontal. Easy for melee to just end up dying there, getting pushed. However, after that, like, they would skip them both when they went to the boss and when they went after as well. Having some death just to make sure that, like, they pull them and then move them out to the side. We saw, I think that's what Myeongshan just ran off, just letting everyone get some few seconds to get past it. And exactly the same strat from both teams, so I like seeing that at least.
Yeah, very just textbook Raider.io as we've come to see them. There is just no area for weakness, presumably. Tomorrow's going to be great. Let's go ahead and take a look at the bracket.
I want to see who can take them down, man.
It's definitely going to be a tough one. Tomorrow we're going to have 2 semifinals and, of course, the grand finals, which, if you hadn't heard, best of 5 tomorrow. So that's going to be an intense series, no doubt. But it's going to be Premonition taking on Honestly, and then Free Marcy taking on Raider.io. Final count for those keeping score at home: 2 Asia-Pacific teams, 1 European team, and 1 North American team. So, yeah, as you said, Rich, shout out to Asia-Pacific because they came in here making some noise. And, you know, when you think of Asia-Pacific teams, a lot of times in traditional esports, you're going to say, oh, well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for Korea. You know, how's Korean doing? But it's ANZ. This region, ANZ, that has come out and made a lot of noise in this invitational.
Yeah, I mean, they managed to come here, they get 2 teams qualified, and they freed Marcy. That's definitely a big achievement for them. But when you look at that upper portion of the bracket, let's say that Raider.io manages to take out Free Marcy. I think that Premonition and Honestly, those 2 teams facing off, that could, first of all, be a grand final. I know that Raider.io is that team that's kind of been looming over the entire MDI. A lot of teams saying that they're scared of them. I'll be honest, even Premonition, I talked to Zachary before I sat down on week number 2, just getting some ideas from him, trying to learn about his team, and he straight up said they're looking at Meowchance splits. They're looking at the times, and they are scared of that team. That's the team that they want to play against the most. But I think that Premonition and Honestly are 2 of the teams that could actually take down Raider.io. If I was going to pick any 2 teams, those were the 2 teams I'd pick.
Yeah, I think regardless tomorrow, those top 4 teams are all extremely talented. Trekkie, aside from Raider.io, is there any team you're looking at specifically?
I'm looking mostly at Honestly, I believe. I definitely do believe that Premonition has a fair chance of winning against Honestly. Those teams are probably relatively matched up. Although I am probably looking more at Honestly. They do run that weird comp where they have 4 stealthers and that warlock as well to deal with that, and it's proven to be very successful. I don't think they've ever had 1 person swap. Maybe one of the games, I think, maybe in the first game.
Yeah, I think they did once. I think they did once.
Otherwise, though, honestly, having that comp, just running with it, not going for anything like double warrior, double rogues. I'm seeing that for Raider.io as well. They're not running those comps. There are other teams that have been running that, and to great success, and people have been complaining about certain classes being overpowered, but then we see the teams that actually are placing really, really high not running those comps. So I really like seeing that.
It's
Definitely.
really easy for people to listen to the talkers sometimes, right? It's easy to say, okay, this composition is really powerful, this class is really powerful, and kind of jump on that bandwagon. But realistically, how much practice have you had on it? Like, how much time have you actually had to theory craft when you're going to be switching your talents, when you're going to be switching your gear, and which gear you even want to have in your bag in the first place? There are a lot of factors that are going to be going on to it. And when we look at Friends with Affixes, for example, when they're playing a tank that is not considered to be one of the best tanks here, they look better every time. So I'm somewhat convinced at this point in the tournament, for this MDI in particular, who knows what the future has in store, but in this one, you should be playing what you're comfortable with, and all of these teams seem to be doing just that.
Yeah, definitely a middle ground to be observed between the powerful classes, your level of comfort, and then, of course, the most important thing all, your holistic overall strategy as a team. But it's going to do it for us, guys. Quarterfinals wrapped up. Join us tomorrow. Love to see you out here. It's going to be the semifinals and then the grand finals of the first ever Mythic Dungeon Invitational. Will Raider.io finish this textbook performance and claim the whole thing? Or will one of these upstart teams give them something to think about? We'll see you guys tomorrow.